Stop living off mom and dad forever. Get lost, you parasite, you money leech. The person hurling these insults at me is none other than my older sister. She has always been arrogant and has mocked me, her younger sister, endlessly. I can't stand it anymore. She's spouting off without knowing anything. I won't show any mercy just because we're family. I'll definitely show her. My name is Lisa. I'm 28 years old. I live in a high-rise condo with my parents. This all started about 6 months ago. The reason was that my father wasn't dead. My dad, a company worker, got hooked on gambling after a colleague introduced him to it. He quickly fell into a pit of debt. He must have borrowed from a shady lender because his monthly payments started swelling fast. Even with my mom taking on a part-time job, our living expenses became more and more strained. That's when it happened. I received a call from my mom, who was at her wit's end. "Lisa, life's really tough right now. Could you help us out with some money?" "What? Dad's debt was that big?" I didn't know either, but it looks like it's much bigger than we thought. My part-time job isn't nearly enough to cover it. I'm stunned. How could Dad do this to you, Mom? And isn't the house we lived in leaking? Is everyday life even manageable? Our home is just rented, so we can't even remodel it. We have no choice but to endure. "Oh, okay. Why don't you guys move in with me?" And that's how I ended up inviting my parents to live in my condo. We've been living as a family of 3 while also helping with Dad's debt repayments. 2 months passed since my parents moved in. While having lunch with my mom, she received a phone call. "Oh, Mom, long time no see." "Hello, is this Carrie?" The person on the phone was my sister, Carrie. What she said next was utterly unbelievable. "Could you lend me some money? I went to the house and no one was there." "Are you guys out?" "Money? I lent you $300 just the other day. Can't help it, I blew it all on slots again." "Carrie, you're..." As you might have guessed, my sister was also a gambler. True to the saying, like father, like daughter, Carrie also had a fondness for gambling. She's a housewife who frequents slot parlors while her husband works. Despite our mother's financial struggles, Carrie continued. "Hey, where are you? Did you move?" "Yes, we moved. That's why nobody was at the old house." "What? You really moved? I didn't hear about this. Give me the address." About that." Knowing my mom's gentle nature, I took the phone from her. "Hey, Carrie, enough is enough. How long will you keep bothering Mom like this?" "Huh? Lisa, why are you there?" "Mom's living with me now. The old house is rented and comes with its own expenses. You're old enough. Stop asking our parents for money. It's embarrassing." "What's itchy? Then you lend me some money." "Why should I?" "Absolutely not. Just stop bothering Mom about this anymore." I ended the call abruptly. My mom looked apologetic, her shoulders slumping. I've never really seen eye to eye with my 2-year older sister, Carrie. She's always in debt and constantly pestering Mom without a hint of gratitude. I've always resented her. After she got married, she rarely visited our family home, and I thought it was a relief that our interactions had dwindled. But recently, it seemed she was starting to come around again, asking for money, especially from Dad. He's been too lenient with her, secretly lending her money despite his own debts and Mom's struggles. If Carrie finds out where I live, it could spell trouble. She's asked for my address a few times already, but I've ignored every request. Then, a few days later, as the 3 of us relax at home, the intercom rang. "I'll get it," my dad said, unusually taking the lead. A few minutes later, the door swung open with a clatter, and a shrill voice filled the room. "Wow, how many stories is this place?" I hurried over in surprise, finding my sister standing there. "What, Carrie? Why are you?" "Oh, don't mind me. You should have told me sooner if you bought a penthouse. Mom and Dad still have money, right?" "But this place is..." my mom started, but my sister seemed oblivious. "Dad, you've always been into slots too, right? Maybe you hit the jackpot." "That's not it, Carrie. This house..." As expected of my dad, "I always knew you were something special, but you're truly amazing." My father blushed, a proud smile spreading across his face. "Oh, stop. What do you mean? This isn't your house, is it? Why are you acting like you own the place?" It appeared my dad had given Carrie the address of our home. Judging by his reaction, she seemed to think he owned the whole place and started making sarcastic remarks at my expense. "Hey, Lisa, how long do you plan on mooching off our parents?" "What? I'm working. I'm not relying on Dad's house like this." "But isn't this house meant for you? You don't even have a husband to support you." My husband, on the other hand, works at a top-tier company after graduating from grad school. Isn't it funny how different we turned out as sisters? And you're at some no-name company with a low salary. Haha. I'm not at a company because... My sister paused, processing my words. Wait, are you seriously unemployed? Why would you think that? I'm not attached to a specific company, but I do work. Unemployed at your age? That's just not acceptable. I don't want to be involved in that. What's your issue? Can't you just listen? Wow, they weren't kidding when they said hitting the nail on the head makes people angry. My sister kept on criticizing me and eventually received a $200 allowance from our father before leaving. That night, I confronted my father. Dad, you know you're in debt, right? Even knowing that, why are you giving Carrie money? I can't help it, can I? Carrie is a full-time housewife with no income. She's in a tough spot. She's wasting it all on gambling. If you can afford to pamper Carrie, why not use it to pay off your debts sooner? Mom and I are both suffering because of this. Okay, I understand. Please don't get so upset. It's frustrating how irresponsible my father can be. But they're still family. I can't just abandon them. Then 2 weeks later, another bombshell dropped unexpectedly. I'm pregnant, so we'll be moving in here with my husband. My sister, who had visited again, had brought her husband this time, announcing they intended to move into our house. Wait a minute. Don't make decisions on your own. This house belongs to me. Huh. This house belongs to Dad. Besides, having you as a freeloader is a burden on our parents. Why do you think you can move in here just because you're pregnant and bring your husband along? Well, I've already canceled my condo lease, so you, the unemployed one, can just stay quiet. I've told you, I'm not a freeloader. How much longer will you get your way until you're satisfied? Our argument was interrupted by Dad, who stepped in, saying, Come on now, calm down, Lisa. Carrie is pregnant, so we can't just kick her out, right? Even you, Dad. Enough is enough. Then my sister bursts out laughing, observing me struggling to maintain my composure. And money? You don't even have an income. Poor Dad, a parasite. Leave, you leech. At that moment, my emotions boiled over with anger. That's enough. She's not family to me anymore. If that's how she wants it, then so be it. With a smirk, my sister watched me. Fine, you want me to leave? Fine, I'll go. It seems you finally understand your own worthlessness. I'll leave as you wish, but whatever happens, it's not my problem. Ha! What's that supposed to mean? You'll be the one in trouble, not me. Upon hearing that, Mom stepped in. Lisa, hold on. I stopped Mom from interfering. Mom, I'm okay. Please don't say anything. But, I'm serious, Mom. I'll be fine. Lisa. Apparently displeased with our conversation, my sister grabbed my arm. Just leave already, you freeloader. The next day, I swiftly packed my belongings and left the house. A few days later, savoring some rare solitude, I got a call from my sister. So, how's life in your new place? Enjoying that dinky apartment? Is that why you called? You've got plenty of free time, I see. Humph. Annoying? I called to check on you, but instead, are you helping Mom? Doing some housework, I assume. My sister chuckled dismissively. Why should I? Housework is Mom's job, isn't it? I'm pregnant, after all. I don't need to bother with that. Really? You're living together. You should be more supportive. How self-centered can you get? Shut up. Unlike you, jobless and worthless, I'm noble just by being pregnant. Understand? I'm valuable. Unlike you, you're irritating. I'm hanging up. And with that, she abruptly ended the call. Concerned, I immediately dialed Mom's number. Mom, it's Lisa. Ah, Lisa. Mom's voice, though just a few days had passed, sounded weary. Mom, Carrie called me. She's leaving all the housework to you. Yes, it was manageable when you were helping Lisa, but Carrie isn't doing anything. I can't believe this. Enough is enough. I'll talk to her tomorrow. Just hang in there, Mom. Thank you, Lisa. I'm really sorry for all of this. Feeling guilty for leaving my timid mom in that situation, I hurried to finish my work. The next day, when I arrived at the condo, an unexpected issue arose, and my sister started complaining as soon as she saw me. Lisa, it's terrible. My husband got arrested for embezzlement. What? Your husband did that? Wow, that's a huge disappointment. Why are you so calm? This is a big deal for me. I don't know. It doesn't concern me. Actually, there's something I wanted to discuss with you today. Ignoring my remark, my sister turned to her father, tears brimming in her eyes. Dad, please help me. I can't survive without my husband. Well, what do you expect me to do? You have money, don't you? Lend me some. No, I really don't have any. That's impossible. In a frenzy, my sister began searching through her father's room. Eventually, she found his bank book and eagerly flipped it open. Her face fell when she saw the balance. What? What's this? Why is there only $1.75 left in the account? In response to my sister's hysterical outburst, I calmly explained, it's because of gambling, just like you. You're joking, right? By the way, Dad's in debt too. What? Hold on. He's living in a luxury condo, right? There's no way he's broke. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. When we opened it, several unfamiliar men in suits stood outside. We have a warrant to seize property. We'll be carrying out the operation now. With that, the men started gathering my sister's belongings one by one. Wait, that's my designer bag from a casino win. And that's my beauty device. Why are you taking these? My husband's embezzlement just happened. Please stop. To my bewildered sister, I laid out the facts. This isn't about your husband's seizure. It's because Dad neglected to respond to all the debt collection attempts. It seems he's been ignoring court notices without informing me or Mom. Oh, what? What does that mean then? How? What about this house? That's why I said it's a rented house. It wasn't purchased and it's not under Dad or Mom's name. No, you're lying. Rent? Why did you tell me sooner? I tried to tell you multiple times, as did Mom. It's you who chose to ignore everything and didn't want to know. How can you afford to rent a luxury condo like this? It doesn't make sense. I'm trading stocks from home. Stocks? Like Dad used to? I tried following his lead and it turns out I'm pretty good at it. The big stock market success wasn't Dad's, it was mine. What? So what about this house? What's going to happen to me? I'm not interested in paying the rent anymore, so eventually, everyone will probably be evicted. I'll find another place, but it'll be tougher for you, being unemployed with a child. Best of luck. I don't see you as family anymore, and I'm not planning to help. With those words, my sister collapsed, crying uncontrollably. Seeing her selfishness on full display, I finally lost my patience. Why are you crying now? After causing so much trouble, you suddenly cry and beg for help when things go wrong? You're incredibly selfish. Mom is coming to live with me. I won't let you drag her down anymore. Stay there with Dad and deal with your own mess until your husband returns. Don't abandon me, please, you're my sister. You need to face the consequences of your actions, sister. As for my sister and father after that, the outcome was inevitable. Eventually, my brother-in-law couldn't repay the embezzled money and ended up in jail. What's worse, it turned out my sister had been unknowingly using the embezzled funds. It became clear she was spending beyond her husband's salary, leading to the conclusion that she was also culpable for ignoring the situation. Meanwhile, my father, without the support of me and my mother who had been helping with his debt, seemed to finally grasp the depth of our assistance. He now works a day job and takes on night shifts as a traffic controller, pushing his aging body to work double shifts. As for me, I've settled into a new home with my mom, and we're enjoying a peaceful life. I've always preferred renting, so if we ever lose this place, finding another won't be a big issue. Initially, Mom was concerned about Dad and my sister, but now she's gradually returning to her old self. Hey, Lisa, I heard there's a new cafe near the station. Mom, you really enjoy cafes, don't you? They say they have amazing waffles there. Let's go together. Sure, after work then. Great, I'll tidy up and wait. Finally achieving this simple, ordinary routine, I plan to cherish this happiness and approach each day with gratitude.
How dare you show your face here? I hissed as soon as I caught sight of Alex sauntering towards me across the school parking lot. My hands clenched by my sides, nails digging into my palms. Alex slid his sunglasses down his nose, his mouth curling into a satisfied smirk. Well, if it isn't my darling ex-wife Meredith, you're looking tired. His gaze raked down my body. I refused to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. What do you want, Alex? Can't I walk my daughter into school? He mocked offense. Our daughter Lila peered at Alex from behind me, unimpressed. She was wise beyond her 7 years when it came to her father. You didn't even call her on her birthday last week, I said sharply. So let's drop the devoted dad act. Alex's smirk faded. Before he could retort, a sleek black SUV pulled up beside us. The driver's door swung open and Ethan stepped out, tall and impeccably dressed. I felt a rush of relief at the sight of my husband. Everything okay here? Ethan asked mildly as he moved to stand beside me. Lila immediately went to him for a hug. Alex's lip curled derisively. Oh look, your white knight has arrived with his fancy new car. Too bad money can't buy taste or erase your seedy past. Ethan tensed, but a warning glance from me made him hold his tongue. I refused to indulge Alex's juvenile jabs about Ethan's privileged background. Not that it was any business of his. You should leave, I said coldly. Instead, Alex gestured at Ethan's SUV with its Delmont Foods logo. I see you clawed your way to the top after all. Then again, sleeping with the boss has always been your specialty, hasn't it, Meredith? Red-hot anger flooded me. How dare Alex throw cheap accusations at me when he was the one who had destroyed our marriage? But before I could spit out a furious retort, Ethan gently squeezed my shoulder. Actually, I'm not an employee. Ethan's voice was calm and steady. I was just named CEO last month when my father retired. So technically, this is now my company. Utter shock flashed across Alex's face. It gave me a rush of vicious satisfaction to realize he'd never known Ethan came from one of the wealthiest families in the state, inheriting a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Alex had only ever seen him as another junior executive at Delmont. Alex's mouth opened and closed, uncharacteristically lost for words. Ethan gave a thin smile. Yes, my trust fund alone could buy and sell you a dozen times over. Not that I make a habit of flaunting my family money. He flicked a piece of lint off his impeccably tailored suit. I just wanted to make one thing very clear, Alex. You are not welcome here. This school, this town, it's my territory now. Stay away from my family, or you'll regret it. Alex paled, shrinked back. Without another word, he turned and hurried away across the parking lot. I let out a long breath as we watched his retreating figure. Well then, Ethan slipped an arm around me. I'd say that's enough drama for one morning. Despite everything, I found myself smiling. No matter what storms we weathered, as long as I had Ethan by my side, I knew I could survive anything Alex tried to throw our way. When Ethan said he wanted to grab coffee after dropping Lila off at school, I readied myself for the talk I knew was coming. Ethan took a long sip of his latte, then set it down and turned to face me. So, you and Alex, and me too for that matter, all worked at Delmont Foods when you met, and the rest is history. The very short version of history, I said softly. Well, let me tell you a quick story on my end. Ethan leaned back, holding my gaze with his steady, pale eyes. You started as an assistant about 6 months before I rolled up from California, another recent MBA grad hotshot, hungry for my first real corporate job. One day the CEO himself takes me out on the Delmont yacht as a perk. And there you were in this tiny bikini. I felt myself flush at the memory. My God, how young and foolish I'd been. Barely 26, vainly trying to land a higher-up boyfriend and climbing up the food giant that was Delmont. Honestly, Meredith, I liked you immediately. You were smart, scrappy, vivacious. Ethan shrugged, almost shyly. But I could also tell you were unavailable. A few discreet questions revealed you were dating hotshot young marketing exec Alex Karev. I winced inwardly at Alex's name. How naive I'd been back then, too, imaging us the perfect corporate power couple. If only I could travel back and warn my past self not to ignore all the red flags. Anyway, I tried to move on and focus on my own career, Ethan went on. But, funny enough, here we are 10 years later, exes with Alex and married instead to each other. Ethan raised an eyebrow, softening his words with a wry smile. I chuckled despite the maelstrom of emotions stirred up by this stroll down memory lane. Here we are indeed. Who could have predicted this is where life would take us? I reached across to squeeze his arm. Lucky me, though. Ethan covered my hand gently. I like to think we both got lucky in round 2, Mir. His voice turned somber. But now I think it's time you told me what really went down between you and Alex. I sighed, old hurts rising up from long-buried depths. Honestly, Ethan, I don't know if I have the full story even now. He changed, slowly at first, stayed out more for drinks with the guys, networked aggressively like his life depended on it. I was scrambling to build my own career too, though. so maybe I just didn't want to see the signs. I shook my head at my own willful blindness. Back then, I just wanted the success, the status, the money. I was willing to ignore too much in exchange for that glittering dream. In hindsight, he was clearly cheating on me for months before I caught him with his assistant. I swallowed hard. It was the biggest cliché punch in the gut, and I wasn't even that shocked, just numb at my own stupidity. "Oh, Meredith." Ethan's voice was gentle. "Don't blame yourself. Alex made those choices." I wanted to make it work at first. I stared into my coffee, remembering those wretched attempts to salvage things as Alex grew ever more brazen with his affair. But when I got pregnant unexpectedly with Lila, it pushed me over the edge. I filed for divorce when I was 8 months along. Ethan blew out a long breath, shaking his head. Well, now Alex popping up again makes more sense. Unfinished business simmering under the surface. I nodded wearily. In my heart, I knew this was only the beginning. Alex's ego would drive him to keep needling old wounds, trying to tear down the happier life I'd built without him. Well, I was more than ready for the fight now. Alex had no idea what he was provoking. My hands shook as I quietly closed Lila's bedroom door, her sobs still echoing in my ears. At 6 years old, she'd just learned the hard truth. Her father didn't want her anymore. I still wasn't sure what had prompted Alex to suddenly file for full custody. Leila had come home from his weekend visit utterly distraught, clutching the court notice. She'd always been an afterthought for Alex at best, so why this sudden strategic move against me now? I stepped out the front door for air, nausea and anger battling inside me. As if conjured by my despair, a sleek sports car purred up the street right then, gliding to a stop at the curb just beyond my driveway. Jenna. Of course, Alex's blonde assistant turned mistress had come to gloat. I strode up to her lowered window, fury overriding my disgust. "Well, hello there, Meredith." Jenna purred, snapping her gum. "Long time no see." Her smug gaze traveled over my worn yoga pants and faded hoodie. "Rough day? Cut the crap." I crossed my arms, refusing to let her see me ruffled. "I'm guessing you're behind this latest stunt from Alex. Does his wife know you're running around town doing his dirty work?" Jenna scowled, dropping her faux-friendly act. "Good. Maybe if you weren't such a shitty mom, Alex wouldn't have to step in for the sake of your daughter," she snapped spitefully. Red hazed my vision. Without thinking, I reached in and snatched the sunglasses off her surgically perfected nose. "Listen very closely, you plastic little homewrecker." My voice lashed like a whip as I leaned down to get in her face. "You both may have money and connections, but I have everything to lose, and that makes me dangerous." I crushed her $100 shades in my fist. "Now get the hell out of my neighborhood before you regret it." Jenna shrank away, for once stunned silent. I stepped back and let her peel off in a squeal of tires. As her taillights disappeared from sight, the red rage seeped away, leaving me drained and hollow. I trudged back inside with leaden limbs, pausing as my eyes landed on the pile of legal documents awaiting my response. Even just glancing at the logo for Alex's law firm kicked my heart rate up again. This was bad. Alex had the fancy lawyers and privilege on his side. While I could barely scrape rent together some months, he clearly aimed to bury me in legal bills, grinding me down through attrition. Exhausted and beaten down by the day's events, I collapsed onto the couch and finally let the tears fall. Hugging a throw pillow to my chest, I let myself cry in heaving sobs. For Lila's innocence shattered too young, for the years and dreams I'd wasted on Alex, for the injustice of seeing bad people continuously rewarded while the good suffered undeserved misery. A quiet knock at the door startled me. Scrubbing hastily at my face, I peeked out to see Ethan on my doorstep, his expression full of concern. "Lila's teacher mentioned there was drama with Alex today and you left upset. I just wanted to come check on you both." He shuffled his feet. "I know I'm probably overstepping, but I had to make sure you were okay." A fresh sob rose in my throat at this kindness. I stepped back in a wordless invitation. Ethan hovered uncertainly just inside. "I'm so sorry you're dealing with this crap from Alex now on top of everything else." His jaw tightened, a hard glint entering those soft blue eyes. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but sometimes karma takes too damn long with assholes like him. Despite everything, his vehemence surprised a watery chuckle from me. I sank back down onto the couch, suddenly beyond grateful not to be alone in this battle anymore. Thank you for coming by, Ethan. I really needed a friendly face tonight. I wiped my eyes, feeling the tiniest spark of hope flickering back to life inside me. And as for Alex, trust me, his karma is coming, one way or another. I tapped my foot impatiently against the courthouse floor, my nerves stretched thin. Any minute now, I expected to hear the click of Alex's designer shoes stalking up the hall, flanked by his army of suits. But the footsteps that approached were slower, more measured. I looked up and, to my astonishment, saw Ethan striding towards me, looking crisp and confident in a charcoal suit that had to cost more than my car. Ethan, what are you doing here? I stared at him, confused. Ever since becoming an unexpected shoulder for me to lean on these past few turbulent months, Ethan had been nothing short of a godsend. But I couldn't imagine why he'd turned up here today of all days. Wordlessly, Ethan held open the conference room door, gesturing for me to enter first. Bewildered, I stepped inside. My knees nearly buckled with relief at the sight of Lila laughing happily away on Izzy's lap. Alex's attorney sister had a soft spot for my daughter even amidst this legal crossfire. I rushed over, unable to resist sweeping Lila into a fierce hug. Over her shoulder I shot Ethan a questioning look. He gave me a slow smile. I'm your new pro bono legal counsel. Surprise. What? How? I sank weakly down into a chair, dizzy with shock. Ethan sat beside me. I called in a favor from an old friend from my Harvard law days who owed me big time. Once I explained the situation with Alex trying to drown you in legal fees as retaliation, he was happy to help. Well, Iz and I decided to throw dear Alex a curveball this morning. Izzy smirked from across the table. Nothing screws up a bully's game plan like being utterly ignored. I glanced between them, almost giddy with relief. Having Izzy on my side had been a key advantage so far, but with Ethan's high-profile connections on board too, I felt unstoppable. Now, Ethan pulled out an intimidatingly thick folder of documents and turned to me with a smile. Let's talk about preempting every devious maneuver your ex may try. Don't worry about the legal bills anymore, Mir. I want to help protect you and Lila any way I can. His hand covered mine, warm and steadying. My heart gave an odd flutter. I tried to ignore the tiny inner voice pointing out all Ethan's attractive qualities, now amplified tenfold in a suit. There would be time later to analyze whatever was simmering between us lately. For now, I needed to focus on the fight ahead. All right, ladies, let's crush this. Izzy cracked her knuckles dramatically and winked at Lila. Auntie Izzy and Godfather Ethan have a bulletproof battle plan ready for the judge, so your mean old dad doesn't stand a chance. Lila's grin filled me with fierce determination. I would move heaven and earth before I let Alex torment my daughter for his petty games. Not when we finally had a real shot at a stable, happy future now, thanks to Ethan. I knew with bone-deep certainty that I could weather any coming storms with this man by my side. My premonition proved true over the whirlwind legal proceedings that followed. Just as Izzy predicted, Alex failed to make even a ripple fighting against the strategic duo of her and Ethan combined. At last came the bittersweet final signing of divorce papers I'd evaded completing for so long. My hand trembled slightly as I scrawled my name one last time as Meredith Kurev. Ethan's steadying grip on my shoulder kept me grounded. As we left the imposing courthouse doors for good, I tipped my face up to the brilliant sunlight with relief. The future lay ahead filled with promise. I could focus on Lila now, on my career, on exploring this surprising new connection with Ethan. The past could finally rest in peace. I turned to Ethan with joyful tears sparkling in my eyes. It's over. We're free. His answering smile outshone even the dazzling sunshine above. No, Meredith. He squeezed my hand, his own rare public display revealing the depth of emotion behind that reserved facade. This is only the beginning. As I hurried down the echoing corridor towards the principal's office, my heart pounded out a frantic beat. The urgent summons from Lila's school ignited all my worst fears. Had Alex overstepped his bounds and caused more trouble? I burst into the room, my stomach knotted into a tangled mess. But the sight behind the imposing oak desk left me speechless. Alex huddled on one chair, suit disheveled and sporting the beginnings of a black eye. Beside him sat Jenna, vainly trying to cover what looked suspiciously like a bite mark marring her exposed shoulder. and standing guard over them both with crossed arms and icy fury blazing in his blue eyes stood Ethan. "Good, you're finally here." Ethan's tone was clipped, a sure sign his anger still simmered below that polished executive surface. "Perhaps you can shed some light on exactly what happened at the playground today, because your ex-husband and his accomplice seem a little dazed on the details." It was only then I noticed Lila tucked against Ethan's side, looking tiny and stressed but physically unharmed. Overwhelming relief at seeing my baby girl uninjured temporarily muted my barrage of questions. I went straight to her and swept her into my arms. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" I pulled back to search her face worriedly. I rushed right over as soon as they called me. Lila's lower lip wobbled. "Aunt Jenna and Daddy came when me and Zoe were playing. They started yelling that Zoe's mom was a stupid lying lawyer," she sniffled. "Zoe cried and ran away. I got mad and bit Aunt Jenna." Her voice rose defiantly on the last line. I blinked, impressed despite myself at my daughter's bold defense of her friend. "Yes, and that was very wrong." Ethan smoothed down Lila's hair gently. "We don't settle fights with our teeth, even when protecting people we care about." He shot a reproving look at Jenna, who flushed and looked away. I stood, hands anchored on my hips. "Would someone please explain what the hell is going on here?" I demanded. Behind me, Alex made a disgruntled noise, but wisely stayed silent. Ethan guided me a few steps away and spoke lowly. Apparently Zoe's mother represented Jenna's ex in a nasty divorce, like ripping him off for millions level nasty. His mouth flattened grimly. "I assume they came here today meaning to cause trouble for her through the kids." Red-hot rage flooded my veins. The absolute nerve of Alex and his scheming girlfriend, dragging innocent children into their deranged grudges. I crossed quickly back to Lila, brushing her hair back to meet her eyes intently. "You were so brave defending your friend. I'm proud of you for standing up to bullies." Over her head, I pinned Alex and Jenna with a blistering look promising swift later retribution. Their twin glares bounced off my fury like droplets of rain. Just then the door banged open, admitting a harried woman I recognized as Zoe's mother. Her shocked gaze bounced between our tense tableau, and Lila tucked protectively under my arm. "Mrs. Quinn." Ethan swiftly intercepted her, laying on his polished CEO charm. "Let's step into the hall to discuss the incident from a legal perspective." He put a hand on her back, smoothly guiding her out. Through the window, I watched him work his magic, doubtlessly summarizing events in a light most favorable towards the girls. I focused back on my daughter, letting Ethan handle diffusing the situation his way. My priority stood cradled here in my arms. The rest could come later. "Let's get you home, baby girl." I lifted Lila's chin gently. "I think we've all had enough drama for one day." Her answering, watery smile and tight hug soothed my raging heart. As we left the tense office behind, I sent up a silent prayer of thanks for Ethan. Yet again he'd raced to our rescue like a dark knight in his sleek black car. And I'd never felt more secure knowing together we could conquer any monsters who dared threaten our peace. The tense silence stretched between us in the aftermath of my furious tirade. Ethan leaned back against the couch, jaw tight as he processed my barrage of bitter revelations. At last, the toxic flood tide of secrets from my past unleashed, I felt hollowed out physically and emotionally. Ethan dragged a hand over his face warily. "Jesus, Mir, I'm so sorry you and Lila have shouldered this toxicity alone for so long. That level of obsessive harassment." He shook his head, lines of anger bracketing his mouth. "Why the hell haven't you involved the authorities before now?" I closed my eyes against the rush of old shame. At first, I just kept hoping if I put my head down and focused on being a good mom, eventually Alex would lose interest when he didn't get a rise out of me. I exhaled shakily. But lately it feels like the floodgates opened, like now that I'm actually happy again, he's snapped. Ethan reached over and squeezed my hand gently. "This cycle of violence stops now, Meredith. No more handling this alone. I'm calling my private security team and a lawyer first thing tomorrow. Then I want to sit down with Lila and explain gently why she won't see her father unsupervised anymore." His eyes tightened with suppressed fury. "Whatever it takes, I won't let that volatile bastard near either of you again." Overwhelmed with relief at finally setting down my exhaustive burden, I leaned into Ethan's strength literally and figuratively. Just feeling his solid chest under my cheek unleashed a fresh wave of tears, only this time, cathartic ones. I wept for the naive girl who once loved Alex unguardedly, for the battered woman who broke finally leaving him, for the protective mother hardened into vigilance against his campaign of cruelty. All different versions of myself rendered refugees by one man's destructive obsession. Ethan simply held me through the storm, hands gently rubbing my back. Having witnessed the traumatic genesis firsthand now, he no doubt understood this purge stood long overdue. At last I surfaced, scrubbing the heels of my hands roughly over my swollen eyes. "I'm so sorry for dumping all this ugliness into your lap, Ethan," I rasped hoarsely. "You deserve better than being saddled with another man's damage." His fingertips nudged my chin up insistently. "You have nothing to apologize for. I care about you, both of you, deeply. I'm not going anywhere." His earnest words unlocked something painfully vulnerable in my chest. Before reason could intervene, I leaned forward and pressed my lips desperately to his. Our first kiss held no artifice or sweet romantic pretense, just raw, exposed need meeting steadfast reassurance. Perfect understanding passed soul-deep between us in the charged silence after we finally broke apart. Ethan grazed my cheek lightly with his thumb. "We'll get through this fire, Meredith. Together." I covered his broad hand with my own, finally daring to hope again for the first time in years. With Ethan beside me, even Alex's sinister storm clouds seemed surmountable threats rather than looming doom. Bolstered by newfound courage, I hugged Lila close that night and made a silent, solemn vow over her sleeping form. No matter the costs, Alex would never torment my baby again. His twisted attacks ended now, one way or another. Mama Bear had awoken at last to protect and shelter her cub, and not even his savagery could stand against my ferocity for long. All his earlier tempests now seemed paltry preludes to the full hurricane fury I would rain down if Alex dared menace my daughter further. For Lila's sake and mine both, the reckoning had arrived, and not even hell itself held an agony sufficient for unleashing on that miserable man, should he push me too far. I stirred my morning coffee absently, still mentally spinning over the latest unthinkable stunt from Alex. Luring Lila out of school illegally to take her for ice cream without my permission counted as kidnapping in my book, never mind his pathetic arguments about just wanting father-daughter bonding time. My phone buzzed with an incoming call, jolting me from vengeful fantasies of sixing Ethan's security squad on my deranged ex. Speak of the devil, I smiled instinctively just seeing Ethan's handsome face flash on my screen. "Please tell me you have good news on the Alex front," I answered without preamble. "Even better." Ethan's smooth voice held a smile. "I come bearing gifts of gourmet cupcakes and moral support. Buzz me up?" I glanced down at my faded college sweatshirt and messy topknot. Not exactly hostess chic, but then again Ethan had seen me far more haggard lately. "You're a lifesaver," I sighed, pressing the door release. Moments later I ushered him inside, unable to resist going up on tiptoes to steal a quick kiss. Ever since that emotionally charged evening when our relationship shifted into romantic territory, I couldn't get enough of Ethan's steadying presence. He held up a box from my favorite bakery, looking unfairly gorgeous, with his slightly rumpled hair and open collar exposing a tantalizing V of skin. "Couldn't have you facing the lawyer on an empty stomach," he winked. I grinned despite my endless Alex-induced headaches. God bless this man. Over lavish red velvet cupcakes, Ethan outlined the injunction paperwork barring Alex from contacting either Lila or me outside official supervised visitation. And if he violates these court orders even once, he'll not only face contempt charges, but also trigger an automatic restraining order. Ethan looked immensely satisfied delivering this news. I could have cried in relief knowing the legal avenues now protected us while the bigger investigation into Alex's shady practices unfolded. Turns out even wealthy corporate executives had limits to flouting the rules under Ethan's watchful eye. Stuffed on cream cheese frosting and justice, I relaxed back with a contented sigh. Hopefully Alex finally realizes he's not exempt from facing consequences. Here's hoping. Ethan stacked our empty plates. Unfortunately, when it comes to ruthless narcissists like your ex-husband, the hard lesson usually requires hammering home a few times. His expression turned serious. I know you're not scared easily, Meredith, but please promise you'll let my security team handle any direct interactions if Alex approaches you or Lila again. My instinctive, stubborn independence bristled slightly at the protective decree, but the earnest love shining in Ethan's eyes wore my reluctance down. I knew his directive came from caring deeply rather than any deliberately heavy-handed male posturing. I lifted our joined hands and brushed a soft kiss over Ethan's knuckles. I promise, babe. No more stubbornly trying to tackle everything solo. His shoulders relaxed, tension easing from his frame. Our sweet moment got interrupted by Lila bounding through the door fresh from school, full of chatter about her day. As we listened indulgently to her winding stories, I felt my heart settle into calm, steady rhythm for the first time in forever. The trials of my past with Alex seemed now muted nightmares compared to this luminous present with Ethan and Lila. I'd been running so hard towards imaginary futures before. I missed recognizing the only dreams worth chasing sat right here under this roof, filled with laughter and light. No matter what storms still brewed on the horizon, together we'd shine brightly enough to weather even Alex's bitterest gale forces. This right here already felt like home, the safe harbor I'd fought so desperately to reach through so many dark and frightening nights. At long last, we'd found our way home. The message stared back at me from my phone screen, my hands trembling. Thought you'd want to see how perfect my life turned out. Ellis proposed last night on the beach in Hawaii. Baby girl due in 2 months too. I have everything I ever wanted. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. Marina. The wound I thought had healed tore open again, raw and aching. You okay, Cal? My husband Adrian peered over my shoulder, his thick brows drawing together. I twisted away quickly, locking my phone. Fine, I muttered. Who was that from? You look like you've seen a ghost. His strong hands clasped my shoulders, warmth seeping through my shirt. I shook my head, avoiding his dark eyes full of concern. I didn't want to taint our happy life together by dragging in the past. Marina was my burden to bear. Just an old friend, I managed. She wanted to catch up. At 7 a.m. on a Saturday? Adrian raised one eyebrow. He knew me too well. Before he could ask more, our 4-year-old cacophony of curly hair and dimples toddled into the room, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. Mama, sausage! His demands derailed us as I scooped him up, peppering his round cheeks with kisses until he squealed. Over tiny fingers sticky with syrup, I met Adrian's gaze. We'll talk tonight after Nate's in bed. He nodded, though his eyes told me he wouldn't forget. After breakfast, I bundled Nate up for the park to buy some time. The cold January air reddened his cheeks as he raced toward the swings, dinosaur flapping. My little munchkin, my light, he filled my days with joy I'd never dreamed possible. Watching Nate play, the wounds in my heart throbbed anew. I couldn't let this go. Marina had stolen so much from me already. My sense of self-worth, my dreams for the future. Years spent battling crippling anxiety and depression, thanks to her mind games. Not this time. She didn't get to swan in with her tacky ring and erase the family I had built. The happiness she mocked me too broken to ever attain. I tapped out a reply with chilled, gloved fingers. Congrats to you and Ellis. I'd love to meet your new baby girl and catch up when you're settled. Saturday brunch next month? My phone pinged seconds later. How thoughtful, Callie. Can't wait to welcome you into our gorgeous new home. I'll make sure the chef whips up plenty of food for us girls to nibble on while we chat. Come hungry. I gritted my teeth as Nate raced over, cheeks flushed, mittened hands grabbing mine to spin dizzy circles. His joyful giggles lightened my mood, even as I worried what seeing Marina might dredge up. I had to try, for my own sake. Closure waited on the other side of her torment. I just had to tough it out. Adrian? I asked later as we lay under the covers, his arms wrapped around me. Want to come with me on a reunion brunch next month? I felt his breath stir my hair as he asked, with that old friend from the message? Yeah. Her name's Marina. My voice stuck in my throat. We have a complicated history. His arms tightened around me. I'm here if you want to talk about it. Haltingly, tears slipping down my cheeks to wet the pillows, I told Adrian about the decade of friendship severed in a single day's betrayal. My first love, Ellis, running off with my best friend when I was just 19. Their wedding just a year later, everyone acting like my pain meant nothing. Adrian listened silently, thumb wiping away the steady drip of tears, his presence my safe harbor. When I finished, he pressed his lips to my hair. "I'll come with you, Cal. We'll face her together." The morning of our ill-fated reunion, I woke before dawn, restless anxiety churning my otherwise empty stomach. Adrian's steady breathing was my only comfort as I slipped from bed to pace our darkened bedroom. Today I would face the friend who twisted the knife of betrayal so cruelly, walking back into a past I wanted only to forget. But forgetting let her win. This time I looked her in the eye as an equal. Adrian emerged bleary-eyed just as pale light filtered through the curtains. Strong arms enfolded me. "It'll be okay, Cal. I've got your back." His voice dispelled some shadows. I nodded into his shoulder, breathing in his woodsy scent before pulling away. "Let's get this over with." I dressed on autopilot, donning armor to guard my still fragile heart. Picking Nate up from Adrian's parents, my smile felt brittle as glass. Their warm hugs soothed like a balm before we headed out. Marina's ostentatious house loomed, windows glinting. My knees went weak seeing Ellis's shiny BMW parked in the drive, vanity plate MD Ellis gleaming. Adrian's hand found mine, steadying. The heavy mahogany door swung open. Marina posed like a magazine spread come to life in a clingy red dress, flawless makeup unable to hide the calculating glint in her eyes as they raked over me. "Callie, so glad you could make it." Her delighted trill didn't reach those cold eyes. "And you brought a guest." I stepped aside to reveal Adrian, pride swelling my heart. "This is my husband, Adrian." Marina's smile fractured for a split second. "Of course. Lovely to meet you, Adrian." She led us inside the cavernous foyer toward the sunlit breakfast nook where Ellis sat scrolling his phone. My pulse stuttered seeing him relaxed amid extravagant flower arrangements and linen-draped tables. Adrian gave my clammy hand a subtle, bracing squeeze. "Ellis, sweetie, you remember Callie?" Marina cooed, "And this is her husband, Adrian." He extended his free hand. After an awkward pause, Ellis stood to shake it, mouth twisting. "Can I offer you some refreshments?" Marina gestured smoothly, the consummate hostess. "Mimosa? Coffee?" I opened my mouth to decline when Adrian said easily, "Coffee would be great, thanks." He met my gaze as Marina wafted away, message clear. We needed to stay alert. An awkward silence swelled. I studied the ostentatious diamond on Marina's left hand, recalling my pure joy when a 19-year-old Ellis proposed to me with a modest ring of his grandmother's. Staring at Marina across the table moments later, I knew she hadn't forgotten either. Her sly smile oozed malicious delight at flaunting her enviable life. My voice came out steady. "Where is that new baby girl of yours?" Marina's smile turned saccharine. "Oh, the nanny has her. I can't be worrying about her fussing right now, can I?" she tittered. I bit my tongue as anger flared. Of course her baby was an accessory, stashed out of sight. I thought of Nate's delightful babble and kissable cheeks. My son was my whole heart, not a status symbol. "You two will have to try for one soon," Marina continued breezily. "I can recommend my fertility doctor if you need. Sometimes it just takes a little push, right?" I froze. We hadn't shared my long struggle with secondary infertility. The barb hit its mark. Adrian shifted closer, draping his arm around my shoulders. "We have an amazing son named Nate. He's 4, I managed. Adrian and I shared a private smile at the thought of our rascal's antics. Marina's gaze turned calculating, thin brows lifting. "Oh, really? You never mentioned him, Callie." Her tongue caressed my name like a taunt. "Well, isn't that nice for you both?" I bit the inside of my cheek, holding her cunning gaze. Adrian's solid presence grounded me for the agonizing small talk yet to come. The opening shots had been fired, but I wouldn't crumble this time. Game on, Marina. The rest of that awkward brunch passed in a tense haze of subtle barbs and thinly veiled boasts. Adrian's solid presence was my lifeline as we navigated the minefield Marina laid with each casually cruel comment. Finally, we made our escape, Ellis's aloof dismissal barely registering through my anger and hurt. Back home, I asked my in-laws to keep Nate a bit longer, needing time to process. Adrian drew me a bath while I stared numbly out the window, lost in memories. The wound Marina ripped open refused to stop seeping anguish, no matter how I tried to stem the flow. I let the lavender-scented water soothe my frazzled nerves before joining Adrian where he waited on our bed. No words passed between us at first in the quiet sanctuary of our room. I found solace leaning against his broad chest, his fingers slowly carding through my damp hair in wordless support. When I felt grounded enough in the present moment, the words started spilling out. Seeing them today was harder than I expected, I admitted. It all came flooding back. How much they hurt me. Adrian listened intently as I plunged into memories I usually kept locked away, finding comfort in having a safe place to unpack that painful baggage. I told Adrian about my teenage years as the shy, awkward girl struggling to believe I deserved friends or admiration. Marina had seemed like a gift, beautiful and bubbly. Her confidence drew others like moths to a flame. I basked gratefully in her popularity and warmth, never dreaming it was all conditional. The first cracks appeared when I caught the eye of Ellis, a handsome track star 2 years above us. Popular Marina had dated strong-jawed football players and cocky student government types more suited to her glittering social tier before. The way she looked at me when Ellis and I shared milkshakes and held hands in the hallways should have warned me our days were numbered. But I was young and blind, drunk on nascent love. The bubbly warmth Marina showed me evaporated overnight when Ellis proposed the Valentine's Day of my senior year. At our celebratory sleepover 2 days later, I emerged from the bathroom to find them half naked and frantic in my bed. Every insecurity came crashing down at once, my sense of self-worth shredded beyond repair. They didn't just take my future or my social life. They took any ability to trust myself or others for years. I swiped angrily at the tears trailing down my cheeks. Adrian's steady heartbeat and the brush of his lips on my hair kept me tethered to now. I believed for so long something was wrong with me after they tore my world apart. Why take what I wanted most unless I didn't deserve it? My voice broke on the ugly truth that shaped so many depressive episodes and sabotaged so many relationships. Adrian shifted onto his side and gently cupped my chin. You didn't deserve what they did to you. That was on them, not you. His eyes radiated fervent conviction. You deserve the world, Callie, and I plan on spending my life reminding you. Fresh tears spilled over at the tenderness in his face. I might bear scars from that traumatic betrayal, but Adrian loved my whole self, damage and all. If seeing Marina was the test, I realized I'd already passed. I had everything today that she tried so hard to deny me out of petty jealousy. I was the lucky one after all. I expected relief after confronting my painful history, but closure remained elusive even weeks later. Adrian watched me poke listlessly at my breakfast with growing concern creasing his brow. You're still thinking about her. It wasn't a question. He knew me too well. I sighed, dropping my fork onto the half-eaten plate of eggs. I just keep replaying it all, wondering if I should have handled it differently. Could I have said something to throw her off balance for once? You stood your ground and held your head high through that ambush. I was proud just to be by your side. Adrian reached across the table to squeeze my hand. She wanted to get under your skin, so don't give her the satisfaction. My phone chimed from the counter, interrupting the tender moment. I shuffled over, expecting a text from my sister or Mom. The sender made my breath halt. Marina? I opened it hastily, nerves sparking. Hi, Callie. Enjoyed our catch-up session last month. I shuddered at her use of catch-up session like it had been two old friends nibbling cookies over tea, not a minefield of microaggressions. Thought you might want to see baby Sloane now that we're home from the hospital. Come by anytime. The words blurred. I could almost hear her playful egging me on tone through the screen. She dangled her perfect newborn like a prize pony, continuing her attempts to flaunt her picture-perfect life. My molars ground together audibly. Adrian came up behind me, wordlessly reading over my shoulder before wrapping me in his strong arms. I'm so sick of her games, Adrian, I whispered into his chest. She's eaten up with jealousy, and it's pathetic. He stroked my hair thoughtfully before pulling back to meet my eyes. You still want closure, though, right? To put this behind you once and for all? I nodded, eyes prickling with irrational tears. Then we end this on our terms. We'll go let her parade around feeling superior, then pull the rug out from under her. I think I know just the way. A sly grin spread across his face. 2 weeks later, we again stood outside Marina and Ellis's ostentatious house, this time with a secret weapon in tow. My palms turned clammy as we walked up, our 4-year-old son babbling happy nonsense between us. Nate knew nothing of the history behind this visit. He just radiated cheerful joy at a special outing with Mommy and Daddy. The door flew open, Marina striking yet another affected pose for her perceived audience. Her scarlet lips parted, eyes widening as she spotted our grinning tow-headed addition clutching my hand. "Callie, you made it, and this must be." Her composure barely flickered. "Our son, Nate," Adrian supplied when I faltered. "Well, isn't he just precious?" Her trill echoed with false delight. "Come in, come in." This time, as we settled around the table laid out with ornate tea sets and dainty finger foods, I fought to hide a smirk. Marina hadn't expected adorable evidence of my abundant happiness. Our eyes locked over the table and her gaze sharpened before her plastic smile reappeared. "Help yourself to snacks. Love," she told Nate with cloying sweetness. "I'll just fetch Miss Sloane from the nanny and be right back." As she sashayed off, I squeezed Adrian's leg under the table, my heart lighter than it had felt in years. Let the games begin. Marina returned moments later, cooing over the blanket-swaddled newborn in her arms, her usually immaculate hair frizzed slightly, betraying the imperfections beneath her polished veneer. I smiled blandly up at her. "What a little doll! You look amazing for just having a baby, Marina." "Oh, this," she laughed lightly, smoothing her figure-hugging dress. "The gym has done more for my physique than any silly fad diet. I won't be caught out with baby weight." I hid a flare of annoyance as she preened. My post-baby body had taken years to regain confidence in after Nate. Her petty comments only highlighted her jealousy. My fit, happy toddler was worth every stretch mark and squishy area that lingered, though Marina would never understand. Oblivious, Nate babbled nonsense at the bundle in Marina's arms between sticky handfuls of cake. My friend cooed over him like borrowed accessory. "Clever boy, you'll have all the girls chasing you in a few years," she trilled, loud enough to grate. I fought not to clench my jaw. "He takes after his father," I said, meeting Adrian's warm eyes. Pride swelled in my chest. Both my guys had the same soulful gazes and riotous dark curls. Marina's smile thinned. "You two do make cute offspring." As if on cue, Ellis emerged fresh from a shower, his dripping hair leaving damp marks on his collar. My stomach tightened. We hadn't seen or spoken to each other in over a decade beyond tense pleasantries 3 weeks ago. Oblivious Nate popped up, bounding over to tug Adrian's sleeve. "Daddy, come see baby." Ellis froze. Eyes narrowing, he took in our son's coloring, a perfect blend of Adrian's Cuban roots and my fair Scottish heritage. The way Nate clung adoringly to Adrian left no question of paternity, despite Ellis's clear surprise. His lip curled derisively. "Precocious little guy you've got there." Heat flooded my cheeks, but Adrian just chuckled, swinging Nate up easily onto his shoulders, their matching grins warming me to my core. My happy little family shone bright enough to eclipse any darkness. Marina hastened to diffuse the sudden tension. "He's such a darling. You must be so proud, Callie." I met her too bright gaze levelly. "Beyond proud. Adrian and I feel incredibly blessed every single day." We shared a private smile over Nate's giggles as he drummed Adrian's curly hair like a keyboard. "Daddy's hair is silly," Nate crowed. Adrian rolled his eyes in mock exasperation, grin belying his true delight in our son's antics. Marina's laughter sounded strained as she watched our easy intimacy. "Well now, Callie, no need to rub it in that you finally snagged your white picket fantasy, Irritation flared in my chest at the thinly veiled scorn. Adrian tensed, ready to unleash some protective heat, but I touched his arm lightly. I could handle her needling lies. Setting Nate down to play with his toy cars, I faced Marina squarely. "I wasn't aware sharing facts about my family counted as rubbing it in, Marina. We couldn't be happier, though. I'm sorry if that bothers you." My teeth flashed in facsimile of a smile. Her nostrils flared delicately. The baby stirred in her rigid arms. It seems motherhood has done wonders for that famous Callie modesty. I bristled as she added breezily, "Don't get me wrong. You were always such a shrinking little violet. I'm glad you finally grew some thorns." Nate's joyful babble underscored the tense silence. Adrian radiated fury beside me, but I squeezed his hand, willing patience. Just a little longer. I let the pretense fall away, meeting Marina's spite-filled gaze with calm certainty. "Maybe you just didn't know me as well as you thought back then." My smile felt more genuine than it had in years. "But I know who I am now. Finally." Marina's frosted pink lips pressed into a thin line, manicured nails digging cruel half-moons into Sloane's blanket. Before she could retort, the front door burst open. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was a beast." My sister Liv breezed in, all bouncing ginger curls and freckled smiles. Her entrance allowed the tense moment to deflate. I almost laughed at the matching, dumbfounded expressions on Ellis and Marina's faces as Liv prattled on, peeling off her coat and scarf to drape on a chair. "I ran into James downtown last week." Liv continued, dropping a kiss on Nate's head as she passed by him playing on the floor. "That man has aged like fine wine, I tell ya." She turned to Adrian with a wink. "No offense, darling." Adrian just chuckled, slinging an arm around my shoulders. "None taken." I bit my lip, watching emotions flicker across Marina's face in rapid succession. Surprise, confusion, dawning unease as she processed our unexpected tag team. Two could play at her manipulation games. "Marina, Ellis, this is my sister Olivia," I introduced after an awkward beat. "Liv, meet my old classmates." "Lovely to meet Callie's nearest and dearest," Liv enthused, shaking their limp hands before cooing at the now fussy newborn. "Ooh, what a wee bairn you have here." Marina shushed Sloane absently, eyes narrowed at our cozy dynamic. I watched the wheels turn behind her calculating gaze. She thought inviting me over would let her gloat about her picture-perfect life, never imagining I now had an abundant support system beyond just Adrian. Well, this is cozy. Marina cleared her throat with affected daintiness. "Anyone for more tea?" "Oh, I'd love a splash," Liv sighed, claiming Marina's vacated seat with enthusiasm. Oblivious to the undercurrents, she launched into a story about her salon mishaps that week, bright laughter filling the terse room. Across from me I noticed Ellis boring holes in Adrian with his stare. My husband seemed relaxed, one arm draped casually over my chair, but I recognized the protective set of his jaw. Adrian radiated easy confidence. This was his arena after all. "So Adrian, is it? What line of work are you in?" Ellis bit out abruptly. Trust a type A doctor like Ellis to lead with thinly veiled competition. Beside him, Marina perked up, clearly wondering the same thing. Adrian smiled placidly. "I'm a chef and restaurateur. Own a few local spots downtown. You've probably heard of Blackbird?" I hid a smirk at their dumbstruck expressions. Adrian's flagship restaurant, Blackbird, was a massive success, featured in magazines and constantly booked months in advance. Far cry from the struggling line cook I'd met years ago, though his humble drive remained unchanged. "I can't say I've had the pleasure." Ellis practically choked out the admission, "though I don't often dine out with my schedule." "We'll have to fix that," Adrian said easily. "Dinner is on me anytime. I insist." His generosity contrasted Ellis's transparent posturing beautifully. Adrian shone confident and self-assured, born of years proving naysayers wrong, while Ellis still clung to same arrogance that drove him to cruelly stomp on my young heart. How had I ever found that appealing? I settled deeper into Adrian's loose embrace with a hidden smile. Marina and Ellis wore equally sour expressions. All their scheming to humiliate me only reflected back their own inferiority complexes, while highlighting what truly mattered, my family. The dam broke over an otherwise innocuous comment. Liv, bless her oblivious heart, turned to me with a wide grin. "So, Collie, think you and Adrian will give little Nate a sibling sometime soon? You know I'm dying to be Auntie Livy to a wee lassie, too." My chest tightened reflexively. We hadn't shared my secondary infertility struggles outside of close family, given the painful sensitivity. I opened my mouth, flailing for a polite deflection, but Marina spoke first. "Oh, they already tried, didn't you, Callie?" Her tongue caressed my name mockingly, eyes glinting. Apparently it didn't take. Fury roared in my ears. The indignity of her smirking down at me, using my private pain as ammunition, broke the final thread of patience holding me back. Adrian shifted beside me, seconds from snapping, but I squeezed his wrist lightly. This was my battle, the culmination of years of my nightmares, starring Marina's sweetly smiling cruelty. No more. Setting my tea down with precise, controlled movements, I met her glittering stare. "I apologize if our happy news today threatens you, Marina. It must be uncomfortable realizing your bizarre invitations failed to showcase the perfect life you clearly crave affirmation for." I kept my voice calm and steady like my hammering heart wasn't audible. "The thing is, our lives were never in competition. I don't need to put you down to lift myself up like you seem determined to do. I'm genuinely happy, though I'm sorry if the same isn't true for you." Marina reeled back as if I'd struck her, cheeks flushed beneath artfully contoured makeup. For the first time in our long rivalry, she had no facile retort prepared. The raw, unveiled hurt in her eyes penetrated through her superficial shields, offering a glimpse of the scared little girl still inside. The one who lashed out in fear of being judged or found unworthy. My anger drained away just as quickly as it arose. With sudden clarity, I realized Marina was the one still living in our traumatic past, prisoner of old insecurities blinding her. Meanwhile, I'd found peace through Adrian's love and the family we built together, the very things she tried so hard to deny me. Her efforts no longer even dented my joy or self-worth. I had finally won by refusing to keep playing her games at all. Into the loaded silence, Adrian added the coup de grace we orchestrated ahead of time for this moment. "Well, this has been an experience, but I think it's best we head home. Busy day tomorrow finalizing the offer on that new restaurant space." He checked his watch theatrically. "Plus, I have a meeting scheduled first thing to brief Ellis's administrators on certain concerning workplace behaviors that have come up." Ellis blanched. As a department chair at the hospital, with a reputation for coasting on prestige and family connections over work ethic, scrutiny into shady practices could be career-ending. Adrian's expression remained placid, but his eyes flashed triumphantly. Nothing brought him more satisfaction than seeing entitled bullies face real consequences. Marina looked rapidly between them in dawning dismay before turning wounded eyes my way. For a heartbeat, I saw again the quivering, rejected 17-year-old girl I'd once been. My chest ached with grief for our broken friendship, the lost potential. Then the shutters descended once more, and scowling, immaculate Marina hid her wounds away, turning without another word to seek refuge behind the fortress of her meaningless perfections. Just like that, it was over. I walked away without a backwards glance, finally free. My talk with Liv 2 nights later revealed the full ripple effects from that explosive day. After screenshotting Adrian's subtly threatening texts to Ellis about reporting physician misconduct, I decided to abide by fate's final twists. Word traveled fast around those elite circles. Humiliated by Adrian's reveal and infuriated by his threats, Ellis retaliated by filing for divorce from Marina. Drunk on self-righteous indignation, he soon found himself suspended from the hospital after my worm of a sister-in-law no longer relayed an unverified complaint about scrub nurse harassment. The perfect life Marina fought so hard to flaunt splintered just like that. I almost pitied her if the depths of her cruelty over the years hadn't burned that softness out of me long ago. Learning she'd been little more than a status symbol herself proved justice enough. Now, she could enjoy Ellis's temper without my shoulder to cry on when it turned her way. Meanwhile, Adrian celebrated a banner year, opening 2 new wildly popular restaurants in LA, while we started an exciting new chapter abroad. That dream trip to Spain we fantasized about during our broke newlywed days in that cramped apartment with peeling paint finally manifested into reality thanks to his soaring success. Nate took to expat life and Spanish lessons like a fish to water while we reveled in sharing beloved foods, vibrant murals, and flamenco music as a family. Our daughter Pilar arrived 9 blissful months after we relocated, her little face the mirror of my own baby pictures. Those joyful early weeks with 2 healthy children, thousands of miles from old ghosts, felt nothing short of an answered prayer. On Pilar's first birthday, I video called my parents back in the States, keeping one eye on our giggling baby covered in cake. Their proud faces filled the laptop screen until Nate ducked into view, clutching his new stuffed llama, chattering about his cool Spanish friends. Watching my son charm my beaming parents with exaggerated hand gestures, mimicking his teachers, I felt my heart expand almost to bursting. After they hung up, I pulled out my journal, pens scratching swiftly to capture the emotions bubbling up. How could I ever explain to little Pilar about Aunt Marina someday? My children knew nothing of frenemies or heartbreak. They jumped freely into life, trusting themselves inherently, something I struggled so hard to learn. I never wanted them to dim their shining light for anyone. Later, Adrian found me staring wistfully at the dark screen after I tucked our worn-out birthday girl into bed with her brother. Strong arms wrapped around me from behind, and I relaxed into his solid warmth. "Happy thoughts?" he murmured into my hair. I nodded, turning to frame his beloved face in my hands, eyes prickling with inexplicable tears. "Just realizing how lucky I am, how happy and free." He smiled softly, brushing his thumb across my cheek to catch one shimmering tear. "You did this, you know. You faced your demons head-on and came out stronger. I'm so proud of you, mi amor." Standing wrapped in Adrian's arms, I let his words sink into my skin, into my very bones. He was right. The dark ghosts that haunted me for so long only had power if I let them. Today I closed that door. Looking forward at the joyful life we built, I wouldn't waste another moment. The girl who let people determine her self-worth was gone. My worth shone through my children's laughter and my husband's loving gaze. Finally, I was enough just as I was. Survivor scars and all, Marina lost her grip long ago. I smiled up at Adrian through tears of hard-won peace, softly echoing his words. "I did this."
The envelope trembled in my hands as I stared at the bank statement inside. My dream house, the one I'd poured my heart and soul into designing and building from the ground up, had been sold. Without my knowledge, without my consent. And the worst part? The signatures at the bottom of the sale documents belonged to my own family. I'm Sonia, and this was supposed to be my 40th birthday celebration. The party decorations still hung mockingly around my father's living room, gold and silver streamers catching the late afternoon light. The cake sat half-eaten on the coffee table, its cheerful happy birthday message now feeling like a cruel joke. "It's for the best, sis," Mackenzie said, reaching for my hand. I pulled away before she could touch me. "Think about it. With this money, we can all have a fresh start. A better life." A better life? My voice came out barely above a whisper. I designed every inch of that house. Every window, every doorway, every detail was carefully planned. It took me 5 years to save enough money to build it. Barry, my older brother, stepped forward with that smug businessman smile I'd grown to hate. "And now it's worth triple what you invested. The market's hot, and we got an incredible offer. Dad agreed it was the smart move." I turned to our father, Winston, who sat quietly in his wheelchair by the window. His eyes met mine briefly before looking away. The guilt was written all over his face. "Dad, you signed off on this?" "Sonia, honey," he started, his voice weak. "They explained everything, the medical bills, my care. It made sense. I would have helped with the bills." I slammed the envelope down on the table. "You didn't have to sell my house." "Don't be dramatic," Mackenzie rolled her eyes. "It's just a house. Besides, we're family. We share everything, remember?" I laughed bitterly. "Share? Like how you shared this decision with me? Or how about how you shared my architectural plans with potential buyers behind my back?" The room fell silent. Uncle Francisco, who had been lurking in the corner, finally spoke up. "Sonia, we all agreed this was the best surprise we could give you. Financial freedom for the whole family." "Surprise?" I spat the word out. "You call stealing my home a surprise?" "We didn't steal anything," Barry interjected. "Dad had power of attorney and—" "Stop." I held up my hand. "Just stop." I walked to my purse and pulled out a carefully wrapped package I'd brought for the party. It was meant to be a gift for the family, the blueprints for potential additions to my house that would have accommodated everyone. Now it would serve a different purpose. "Here's my surprise for you," I said, placing the box on the table. "Don't open it yet. Wait until you've moved into your new mansion." Trisha, my best friend who had been witnessing this whole scene in shocked silence, stepped forward. "Sonia, maybe we should go get some air." "No need," I said, gathering my things. "I'm leaving anyway. Apparently, I have to find a new place to live." "Don't be like that," Mackenzie called after me. "We're having dinner later to celebrate. We ordered your favorite Thai food." I turned at the door, taking in their faces one last time. Mackenzie's false concern, Barry's calculated indifference, Uncle Francisco's discomfort, and my father's quiet shame. "You know what the worst part is?" I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "I designed that house with spaces for each of you. A ground floor suite for Dad, an office for Barry, a playroom for Mackenzie's kids. I was going to surprise you all next month once the additions were approved." The color drained from Mackenzie's face. Barry's smug smile faltered. Dad looked like he might cry. "Sonia?" He reached out, but I was already walking away. "Happy birthday to me," I muttered, stepping out into the cool evening air. Trisha followed me to my car. "What was in that package?" she asked quietly. I started the engine, a plan already forming in my mind. "Just some blueprints, but they're missing a few crucial details that only I know about." "Sonia," Trisha's voice held a warning. "Don't worry," I said, managing a small smile. "I'm not going to do anything illegal. I'm just going to teach them a lesson about karma and structural integrity." As I drove away from my father's house, I caught a glimpse of my family through the window, already huddled around the package I'd left behind. They had no idea what was coming. Sometimes the best revenge isn't served cold. It's built into the very foundation of things. Let them have their mansion. They'd soon learn that some things are worth more than money, and some betrayals come with architectural consequences. 3 days after my disastrous birthday party, I sat in Trisha's kitchen, nursing my second cup of coffee and scrolling through apartment listings on my phone. Nothing felt right. How could it when I'd poured my soul into designing the perfect home? "You haven't told me what was really in those blueprints," Trisha said, sliding a plate of pancakes across the counter. "And don't give me that innocent look. I've known you since college." I set my phone down. "Remember that structural support beam in the east wing? The one that makes the whole second floor possible?" "Yeah? Well, the blueprints I gave them don't show it. Or rather, they show it in the wrong place." I took a bite of pancake. "If they build according to those plans—" "Sonia!" Trisha nearly dropped her coffee. "That's dangerous." "Relax," I said, holding up my hand. "The issues will show up long before anything catastrophic happens. Small cracks, settling problems. Nothing life-threatening, but enough to make that house a nightmare to live in." My phone buzzed, Mackenzie calling for the 20th time. I declined it. "You should answer eventually," Trisha said. "They're probably worried about you." "Worried about their investment, you mean?" I stabbed another piece of pancake. Barry already left 3 messages about the paperwork needed for the renovation. As if on cue, my phone lit up with a text from Barry. "Stop being childish. The contractors need the original plans. Call me." "Delete," I muttered, swiping the message away. Trisha leaned against the counter. "Have you talked to your dad at least?" The question hit a sore spot. Dad had left several tearful voicemails, each one making my heart ache more than the last. But the betrayal still felt too raw. "I can't," I said. "Not yet." The doorbell rang, making us both jump. Trisha peeked through the window and grimaced. "It's Mackenzie." "Of course it is." I grabbed my coffee and headed for Trisha's back door. "I'm not here." "Sonia." Mackenzie's voice carried through the house. "I know you're staying here. Please, we need to talk." I paused at the door, my hand on the handle. "Let her in. Maybe it's time I say what needs to be said." Trisha opened the front door, and Mackenzie burst in, looking frazzled in her designer workout gear. "Finally. Do you know how many times I've tried to reach you?" 67 calls, 28 texts, I said coldly. "I counted." "The contractor started work yesterday," she said, dropping her expensive handbag on Trisha's counter. "But something's not right with the plans you gave us. Barry's furious." I took a slow sip of coffee. "Is he now?" This isn't a game, Sonia. We invested everything in this project. The kids are so excited about their new rooms, and Dad's already picked out furniture for his suite. Funny how you all made plans for my house without me. Mackenzie's face softened. I know you're hurt, but we did this for the family. Think about Dad's medical bills, about the kids' college funds. Stop. I set my cup down hard enough to make Trisha wince. You did this for yourself. Don't pretend it was about Dad or the kids. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed. You want to talk about fair? I watched you and Barry parade potential buyers through my home while I was at work. I saw the real estate listings you posted without my knowledge. Uncle Francisco told me everything. Mackenzie's face went pale. He what? He felt guilty. Called me the night before my birthday to warn me, but it was too late. The papers were already signed. We were going to tell you, she started. When? After you'd moved all my things out? After you'd torn down the walls I designed? Trisha quietly slipped out of the kitchen, giving us privacy. The plans you gave us, Mackenzie said, changing tactics. Barry says they're incomplete. We need the originals. I walked to the window, looking out at Trisha's garden. Those are the originals. No, they're not. The contractor says there are inconsistencies. Then maybe you should have hired a better contractor. Or better yet, consulted the architect who designed the house in the first place. Mackenzie's voice turned pleading. Please, Sonia, we're family. Family doesn't steal from family, I said, turning back to face her. Family doesn't use power of attorney to force a sale. Family doesn't betray trust for profit. What do you want? She asked, desperation creeping into her voice. Name your price. I walked to the door and held it open. I want you to live with your choices, Mackenzie. All of them. You're making a mistake, she said, grabbing her bag. Barry won't let this go. Neither will I. I met her eyes. Tell Barry to enjoy the house. I'm sure it will be everything you deserve. After she left, Trisha came back in. You okay? I nodded, picking up my phone and finally opening my dad's messages. I will be. Sometimes you have to tear things down before you can rebuild them properly. Including family relationships? Trisha asked softly. Especially those, I said, starting to type a message to my father. But this time I'm designing the foundation. A week later, I sat across from my father at his favorite diner, watching him stir his coffee with shaking hands. The morning light streaming through the windows made him look older, more fragile than I remembered. The house is coming along, he said quietly. Barry hired some fancy contractor from downtown. Did he? I focused on spreading jam on my toast, keeping my voice neutral. They opened your gift yesterday, Dad continued. The blueprints. They seem different from what I remember. I set down my knife. Different how? Barry and the contractor spent hours arguing about them. Something about support structures not matching the original foundation. He looked up at me. Honey, what did you do? Before I could answer, the diner's bell chimed. Uncle Francisco walked in, spotted us, and made his way to our booth. I thought I'd find you two here, he said, sliding in next to Dad. Barry's been calling me all morning, demanding I talk some sense into you, Sonia. And what sense would that be? I asked, pushing my plate away. Francisco sighed. The contractor says the plans don't add up. They've already poured new foundations based on those blueprints, but something's not right. That's terrible, I said, taking a sip of coffee. Maybe they should have consulted the architect first. Sonia, Dad's voice cracked. Please, I know we hurt you. Hurt me? I leaned forward. Dad, you gave Barry power of attorney without telling me. You signed away my home. I thought, he stumbled over the words. They said it was for the best, that we could all live together, take care of each other. Francisco cleared his throat. Barry can be very persuasive when he wants something. And Mackenzie? I asked. Was she persuasive too when she brought potential buyers through my house while I was at work? Dad's face fell. She did what? Your children, I said, gesturing to include Francisco. Except for me, decided my house was their ticket to a better life. They just forgot to include me in the decision. The waitress appeared with more coffee. We sat in uncomfortable silence until she left. The contractors started noticing issues yesterday, Francisco said. Small things, but what? The foundation measurements don't align with the upper floor plans. The support calculations seem off. He pulled out his phone, showing me photos. See these marks? The contractor says the stress points are all wrong. I glanced at the photos, fighting back a smile. Interesting. Sonia. Dad reached across the table for my hand. Whatever you're doing, please stop. They've invested everything in this renovation. Everything except respect, I said, but I squeezed his hand gently. Did you know I designed that house with all of you in mind? Every room had a purpose. Dad's eyes welled up. Barry mentioned something about that, about special rooms. A ground floor suite for you with wide doorways for your wheelchair and a private garden view. A playroom for Mackenzie's kids with built-in storage and a homework nook. Even an office for Barry with soundproof walls for his conference calls. I pulled my hand back. I was going to surprise you all. Francisco cursed under his breath. We really messed up, didn't we? My phone buzzed. Another text from Barry. The contractor's threatening to walk. Fix this now. You know what hurts the most? I showed them the message. Not once has anyone apologized. Not once has anyone acknowledged that what they did was wrong. It's all about fixing the problem, saving their investment. I'm sorry, Dad said, his voice barely a whisper. I should have talked to you first, should have trusted you more. The simple apology hit me harder than I expected. I blinked back tears. The plans, Francisco said carefully. Can they be corrected? They can, I nodded, but I have conditions. Anything, Dad said quickly. I want my house back. Not to live in, they can keep it, but I want my name on the architectural plans. I want recognition for my work. I straightened in my seat. And I want a formal apology from Barry and Mackenzie, in writing. Francisco nodded slowly. That's fair. And one more thing, I added. No more decisions about my life without consulting me first. No more power of attorney surprises. Dad reached for my hand again. Done. I'll tell Barry myself. They won't like it, Francisco warned. They don't have to like it, I said, pulling out my tablet and opening the correct blueprints. But if they want this house to stand, they'll agree. As I showed them the proper plans, pointing out the crucial differences, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about standing up for myself, about rebuilding trust brick by brick. You're a lot like your mother, Francisco said softly. She never let anyone push her around either. I smiled, remembering Mom's fierce independence. No, she didn't, and neither will I. The first cracks appeared 3 weeks after construction began. I knew because Mackenzie couldn't help but document everything on social media, including her growing concerns about the mysterious issues with their dream home renovation. Look at this, Trisha said, showing me Mackenzie's latest post while we walked through the park. The marble countertops they installed yesterday are already showing hairline fractures. I glanced at the photo. That's because the floor isn't properly supported. The weight distribution is all wrong. You're enjoying this way too much, Trisha laughed. Maybe a little. I stopped to sit on a bench. But they still haven't apologized. Barry sent his lawyer instead. What did the lawyer say? That they'd consider my demands if I provided the correct plans immediately. I pulled out my phone, showing her the email. They're trying to strong-arm me again. My phone rang. It was Uncle Francisco. I put it on speaker. "Sonia, you need to come see this," he said without preamble. "The house? It's making noises." "Noises?" I shared a look with Trisha. Creaking, groaning. The contractor says it's normal for new construction, but Barry's freaking out. He's here now, yelling at everyone. I could hear the commotion in the background, Barry's voice rising above others. "I don't care what it costs. Fix it." "On my way," I said, already standing. 20 minutes later, Trisha and I pulled up to my former home. The construction site was chaos. Workers arguing with Barry, Mackenzie pacing on the front lawn, and Dad watching everything from his wheelchair on the porch. "Finally," Barry stormed over as I got out of the car. "Fix this mess you created." "Hello to you too, brother," I said calmly. "Having some problems?" A loud crack echoed from inside the house, making everyone freeze. One of the workers came running out. "Mr. Barry, the master bedroom floor. It's separating from the wall." Mackenzie let out a small scream. "Our bedroom. All my designer furniture is in there." I walked toward the house, Barry and Mackenzie trailing behind me. Inside, the damage was exactly what I'd expected. The improper support structure was causing the second floor to slowly pull away from the main frame. "This is your fault." Barry grabbed my arm. "You gave us faulty plans on purpose." I yanked my arm free. "I gave you exactly what you deserved. You stole my house, remember? We paid market value. It wasn't for sale," I shouted, finally losing my cool. "This was my home, my design, my life's work." Another cracking sound made Mackenzie jump. "Please, Sonia, we'll lose everything if this house fails inspection." "You should have thought of that before you went behind my back." I turned to leave, but Dad's voice stopped me. "Sonia?" he called from the doorway. "Show them." I looked at him, confused. "Show them what this house was meant to be," he continued. "Show them your original vision." I pulled out my tablet, hesitating for a moment before opening the original plans. "This is what I designed," I said, turning the screen toward them. "See these support beams? They're meant to create an open concept space while maintaining structural integrity. And these walls? They're load-bearing, designed to distribute weight evenly across the foundation." Barry leaned in, his anger giving way to genuine interest. "The office? It has a private entrance? And soundproof walls," I nodded. "For your conference calls." Mackenzie pointed to another section. "Is that a children's wing?" "With a homework nook, art station, and built-in storage for toys. I knew how much your kids love to spread out when they play." Tears formed in Mackenzie's eyes. "You thought of everything." "I did." I closed the tablet, because this wasn't just a house to me, it was our family's future. Another ominous crack echoed through the house. A worker ran in, panic on his face. "Everyone out! The structure's becoming unstable." We hurried outside, watching as small fissures appeared along the exterior walls. Dad wheeled himself next to me. "Can it be fixed?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I said, "but they'll need to tear down most of the new construction and start over, with the correct plans this time." Barry ran his hands through his hair, looking defeated. "How much?" "The plans?" I turned to face him. "They're not for sale." "Then what do you want?" "What I asked for before. My name on the architectural plans, recognition for my work, and a formal apology from both of you. In writing." Mackenzie stepped forward. "And then you'll help us fix this?" "Then I'll help you build the house I always meant to create, the one that would bring our family together, not tear it apart." Barry and Mackenzie exchanged looks. Finally, Barry nodded. "Deal," he said, extending his hand. "And I'm sorry, Sonia. We should have never gone behind your back." I shook his hand, feeling the first real step toward reconciliation. Apology accepted. Now, let's talk about proper structural support. The structural engineer, Colton, walked through the partially demolished house, shaking his head and making notes on his tablet. I followed behind him, watching Barry and Mackenzie's faces grow increasingly pale with each disapproving click of his tongue. "This is worse than I initially thought," Colton said, stopping in what used to be the living room. "The foundation work you did based on those incomplete plans? It's compromised the entire structure." "How bad is it?" Barry asked, his usual confidence nowhere to be seen. Colton pointed to the ceiling. "See those stress fractures? They're spreading because the load-bearing walls aren't properly aligned with the support beams. And the second floor?" He paused, looking at his calculations. "It's a miracle it hasn't collapsed yet." Mackenzie grabbed my arm. "You wouldn't have really let it collapse, would you?" "Of course not," I said, pulling free. "That's why I made sure the problems showed up early, before anyone could get hurt." "Clever." Colton nodded, studying my original plans. "You deliberately misaligned the support structures just enough to cause visible issues without catastrophic failure. Professionally speaking, that's quite impressive." Barry paced the room, dust rising with each step. "So, what's the damage? How much to fix it?" "Well," Colton swiped through his tablet, "you'll need to tear down about 70% of the new construction. The foundation needs significant reinforcement, and the entire second floor has to be rebuilt from scratch." "Cost?" Barry pressed. "Given current material prices and labor?" Colton did some quick calculations. "Around 800,000. "What?" Mackenzie's voice rose to a shriek. "That's more than we made selling the house in the first place." I stepped forward, opening my own tablet. "Not if we do it right this time. Look at these alternative materials I've sourced. They're just as good but more cost-effective, and I know some contractors who owe me favors." "You do that?" Barry asked, surprise evident in his voice. "Help us save money after everything?" "I'm not doing it for you," I said firmly. "I'm doing it for Dad, and for the house itself. It deserves to be built properly." A loud thump from upstairs made everyone jump. One of the workers called down. "Another support beam just shifted." "Everyone out," Colton ordered. "This structure isn't safe until we start the repairs." Outside, we found Dad talking with Uncle Francisco on the front lawn. They were looking at old family photos on Francisco's phone. "Remember this one?" Francisco held up the phone. "Sonia's graduation from architecture school. She was already sketching plans for this house back then." Dad smiled. "She used to draw house plans on napkins at dinner. Always said she'd build something special for the family." "I did build something special," I said, joining them. "You just couldn't see it." Colton approached with his final report. "Mrs. Mackenzie, Mr. Barry, I need your signatures on these demolition approvals. We should begin as soon as possible." As they signed the papers, I noticed Mackenzie's hands shaking. "What about my furniture?" she asked quietly. "All those custom pieces. We'll store them in my warehouse," I offered, "free of charge." She looked at me, tears in her eyes. "Why are you being nice to us? We don't deserve it." "Because that's what family does," I said. "We help each other. We just need to do it the right way this time." Barry finished signing and turned to me. "I had my assistant draft the formal apology you wanted. It's being notarized today." "Good," I nodded. "And my name on the plans?" "Already done." He pulled out a document. "You're officially listed as the architect of record. Full credit for the design." A crash from inside the house made everyone turn. A window frame had come loose, shattering on the ground. "That's it," Colton announced. "We're starting demolition tomorrow. No more delays." I looked at my family, Dad in his wheelchair, looking both worried and hopeful. Francisco standing protectively behind him, Barry trying to maintain his composure as his investment crumbled, and Mackenzie finally showing genuine remorse. I'll draw up new contracts tonight, I said. We'll do this right, together this time. But there are going to be rules. Anything, Mackenzie said quickly. All decisions go through me first. No more surprise changes or unauthorized modifications. Barry nodded. Agreed. And we have weekly family meetings to discuss progress. Everyone gets a voice, but I have final say on all architectural decisions. Of course, Dad said. It's your design. Then let's get started, I said, already pulling up the original plans. We've got a house to rebuild, and this time we're going to build more than just walls and rooms. As the demolition crew arrived to set up their equipment, I caught Trisha watching me from her car. She gave me a thumbs up and mouthed, "Proud of you." I smiled back. Sometimes the strongest foundations are built on forgiveness, but only after the old damaged structure has been completely torn down. No, absolutely not, I said, pointing to the marble samples Mackenzie had spread across the temporary site office table. These are too heavy for the new floor structure. We need something lighter. But they're Italian, she protested. The designer said. The designer isn't an architect, I cut her off, and the designer isn't paying for structural reinforcements. Barry looked up from his laptop. What about the budget impact? These porcelain tiles I've selected, I pulled out my samples, cost half as much and won't compromise the floor's integrity. Plus, they're more durable. Our weekly family meeting had turned into an impromptu design session. Dad watched from his usual spot by the window, taking in the new foundation work happening outside. The crews are making good progress, he observed, different from last time. Because we're doing it properly now, I said, organizing my drawings. No shortcuts, no compromises. The door opened and Uncle Francisco walked in with lunch, boxes of pizza that filled the room with the smell of garlic and herbs. How's the great rebuild going? He asked, distributing plates. Sonia won't let me have my marble countertops, Mackenzie pouted. Sonia won't let us go bankrupt, Barry corrected, reaching for a slice. Have you seen the latest material costs? I spread out the updated budget sheets. If we stick to my recommendations, we'll actually come in under budget. That means extra funds for Dad's therapy room equipment. Dad perked up. The hydrotherapy tub? And the adjustable resistance machines. I nodded, all properly anchored to reinforced floor joints. Mackenzie picked at her pizza. I still don't understand why we can't. A knock at the door interrupted her. Colton entered, covered in construction dust. Sorry to interrupt, but we've hit a snag with the East Wing Foundation. Need your input, Sonia. I'll come look. I stood, but Barry grabbed my arm. Wait, we haven't finished discussing the kitchen plans. The foundation comes first, I said firmly. Always. Outside, the construction site was a maze of concrete forms and steel reinforcement. Colton led me to where the crews had exposed an unexpected problem. The soil composition changes here. He pointed to a section of earth. Your original plans accounted for this, but the modifications they made created a weak point. I finished. Show me the readings. As we discussed solutions, I noticed Barry had followed us out. He stood quietly, watching me work through calculations and adjust specifications. I never really understood what you did, he said finally. As an architect, I mean. I thought it was just drawing pretty pictures. It's engineering, physics, and art all rolled into one, I replied, marking new measurements. One mistake can bring everything crashing down. Like our family almost did? I looked up, surprised by his tone. Barry, always confident, always in control, looked vulnerable. I was wrong, he continued, about the house, about everything. I got caught up in the potential profit and forgot about what really mattered. The profit or the power? I asked quietly. He winced. Both, I guess. Watching you work these past weeks, I finally see what we almost destroyed. Colton tactfully moved away, giving us privacy. You know what hurt the most? I said, standing up. Not the betrayal, not even losing the house. It was realizing that my own family valued money over my dreams. I'm sorry. Barry's voice cracked. Really sorry. Not just because we got caught, or because the house started falling apart, but because we hurt you. A shout from the crew drew our attention. They'd successfully adjusted the foundation forms according to my new specifications. Look at that, Barry said. They actually listened to you. Amazing what happens when you respect someone's expertise, I replied dryly. Back in the office, Mackenzie had arranged the tile samples in a pattern. Okay, she said as we entered. I see what you mean about these porcelain ones. They're actually beautiful, and the pattern possibilities, finally coming around? I smiled. Well, you were right about the marble, and, she hesitated, about a lot of other things too. Dad wheeled over to look at the samples. Remember when you girls used to play with Mom's tile catalogs? Mackenzie always went for the flashiest options. And Sonia always checked the technical specifications first, Francisco added. Some things never change, I said, but without bitterness this time. But some things do, Mackenzie stood up. Like me, I've been terrible, Sonia. Entitled and selfish and, I'm sorry, really sorry. The room fell quiet, the only sound being the construction work outside. I know, I said finally. That's why we're here, rebuilding, not just the house, but us. Speaking of rebuilding, Colton poked his head in, we need those revised plans for tomorrow's concrete pour. Right, I gathered my materials. Family meeting adjourned. Time to go build something solid. As everyone filed out, Dad caught my hand. You're doing good, honey. Your mom would be proud. I squeezed his hand, watching my siblings actually helping clean up instead of leaving a mess like usual. Sometimes the strongest structures rise from the rubble of what came before. And this, I said, leading my family through the nearly completed house, is Dad's suite. I opened the double doors to reveal a spacious ground floor apartment, flooded with natural light from the carefully positioned windows. Dad wheeled himself in, his eyes wide. The garden view? It's exactly like your original sketches. Complete with automated blinds and climate control, I demonstrated the wall-mounted tablet. Everything can be adjusted from your chair. Mackenzie ran her hand along the custom height countertops in the kitchenette. You really thought of everything. That's what happens when you let the architect do her job, Barry said, examining the reinforced door frames. No cutting corners. 3 months of reconstruction had transformed the house. Gone were the unstable walls and compromised foundation. In their place stood something stronger, better planned, and infinitely more meaningful. Want to see the therapy room? I asked Dad. His face lit up. Is the equipment installed? Just finished yesterday. I led the group through a connecting door to a professional-grade rehabilitation space. The hydrotherapy tub has extra safety features, and all the machines are positioned for easy transfer from your chair. Dad wheeled up to one of the resistance machines, testing the grips. His hands trembled slightly, but his smile was steady. This is better than the clinic's setup, he said softly. Speaking of better, Barry checked his phone. The final inspection is scheduled for tomorrow morning. It'll pass, I said confidently. Every beam, every joint, every connection has been triple-checked. Colton appeared in the doorway. Sonia, the crew needs you upstairs. Something about the skylight installation in the children's wing. Coming, I turned to my siblings. Want to see your spaces? Upstairs, the transformation was even more dramatic. The children's wing, with its homework nook and art station, made Mackenzie tear up. The kids are gonna love this, she whispered, touching the built-in storage units. No more toys scattered everywhere. And look, I pressed a hidden panel, revealing a slide that led down to the playroom. Emergency escape route disguised as fun. Genius, Barry admitted. Pure genius. We moved on to his office suite. The soundproof walls were up, the custom acoustic panels installed. A private entrance led to a small deck overlooking the back garden. Conference calls without interruption, I explained, and the deck for those stress relief breaks you pretend not to take. Barry laughed, a genuine warm sound I hadn't heard in years. You know me too well, sis. Ms. Sonia? One of the workers called from down the hall. The skylight team is ready. I found them setting up the final piece, a massive glass panel that would flood the central staircase with natural light. The installation was tricky, requiring precise alignment with the support structure. Hold the north edge exactly there, I directed, checking the levels. We need perfect weight distribution. My family watched from below as the glass was carefully lowered into place. When the last bolt was secured, sunlight streamed through, creating patterns across the walls. It's beautiful, Mackenzie breathed. It's engineering, I corrected. Beauty is just a bonus. Later, as the workers packed up for the day, we gathered in the kitchen, the heart of the house, just as Mom always said it should be. Francisco had brought takeout, and we sat around the new island, eating directly from containers like we used to do as kids. Remember when we'd have family dinners at the old house? Dad asked, his voice nostalgic. Your mother would make everyone help cook, even if it meant disaster? Like when Barry set fire to the curtains trying to make flambe? Mackenzie giggled. Or when you used salt instead of sugar in the cookies? Barry shot back. At least I didn't steal anyone's house, Mackenzie said, then froze. Sorry, Sonia. Too soon? I surprised myself by laughing. Maybe not. We've come a long way from that birthday surprise. We really have, Barry agreed, though I could have done without the whole house falling apart lesson. Sometimes the best lessons come from watching things fall apart, Francisco said wisely, as long as you know how to put them back together. Dad reached for my hand across the island, and we had the right person for that job. The setting sun through the skylight cast long shadows across the kitchen floor. In that moment, I saw our family reflected in the house itself, broken apart but rebuilt stronger, with better foundations and proper support structures. Final inspection tomorrow, Barry reminded everyone. Should we be worried? No, I said, gathering the empty containers. Everything's exactly where it should be now. The house is solid. And the family? Mackenzie asked quietly. I looked around at them. Dad in his wheelchair, but stronger than ever. Barry without his usual arrogance. Mackenzie showing real growth. And Francisco, our steady support through it all. The family, I said, might be even stronger than the house. Outside, the construction lights clicked off one by one, leaving the house glowing from within, a beacon of what we'd built together, not just in concrete and steel, but in trust and understanding. Congratulations, the building inspector said, handing me the final approval document. This is some of the finest work I've seen in 20 years. I held the paper carefully, aware of my family's anxious faces behind me. Thank you. The structural solutions are particularly impressive, he continued, making final notes. Most architects wouldn't have thought to incorporate those reinforcement techniques. Barry stepped forward. That's because most architects aren't my sister. The inspector packed up his equipment. Well, the house is officially cleared for occupancy. You can move in whenever you're ready. After he left, Mackenzie let out a squeal she'd obviously been holding in. We did it! We actually did it! No, Barry corrected her. Sonia did it. We just finally got out of her way. Dad wheeled himself to the front door, where a newly installed brass plaque caught the morning light. It read, Designed by Sonia Vasquez, architect. Your mother would love this, he said, touching the plaque. She always said you'd build something amazing one day. Speaking of amazing, Francisco called from inside, there's something you all need to see. We followed his voice to the living room, where Trisha stood next to a covered easel. I hadn't even heard her come in. What's this? I asked. A surprise, Trisha smiled. A good one this time. She pulled off the cover to reveal a framed architectural drawing, my original sketch of the house, the one I'd drawn on a napkin during college. Where did you get that? I gasped. Your mom gave it to me before she passed, Dad said. Asked me to save it for the right moment. The simple sketch showed the basic shape of what would become this house, with notes scribbled in my messy handwriting, Dad's suite here, and kids' space, and Barry's quiet zone. Even back then, Mackenzie said softly, you were planning for all of us. Family was always the foundation, I replied, touching the glass. I just lost sight of that for a while after what you did. We all lost sight of what mattered, Barry admitted, but you brought us back, brick by brick. A noise from the kitchen interrupted us. The caterers arriving to set up for the housewarming party. I'd insisted on hosting it, turning what could have been a bitter memory into a new beginning. Before everyone arrives, Dad said, pulling an envelope from his jacket, there's something else. He handed me the envelope. Inside was a deed to a small piece of land just outside the city. What's this? Your next project, he smiled. If you want it, that lot you always talked about, the one with the view of the mountains. My hands shook. The one Mom loved? But how? Barry and I pooled our resources, Mackenzie explained. It's not as big as this house, but it's perfect, I whispered, already seeing the possibilities. But I thought you spent everything on this renovation? Barry shrugged. I sold my boat. Turns out I prefer solid ground anyway. The caterers began setting up, the sounds of their work mixing with the gentle hum of the house's systems, all working perfectly, all in harmony. You know, Francisco said, examining the framed sketch, this house is like our family portrait now. Every room tells our story. Even the bad parts? Mackenzie asked. Especially those, I said. They're what made us rebuild stronger. The doorbell rang, first guests arriving early. Before we went to answer it, Dad caught my hand. Sonia, he said, his eyes bright with tears, I know we can never fully make up for what we did, but seeing you transform this house, watching you turn our mistake into something beautiful, I've never been prouder. I knelt beside his wheelchair. Dad, the house isn't what matters anymore. It's what we built inside it. Trust, respect, understanding, and proper support structures, Barry added with a grin. Those too, I laughed, standing up. Now, let's show everyone what a real family builds together. As guests began filling the house, their voices echoing off perfectly engineered walls, I watched my family move through the spaces I'd created. Dad showing off his therapy room, Mackenzie's kids breaking in the slide, Barry actually relaxing on his office deck. Trisha appeared beside me. Happy ending. No, I said, pulling out my tablet to show her my first sketches for the mountain lot. New beginning. Want to help me design another masterpiece? Only if you promise no revenge blueprints this time, she teased. Don't need them anymore, I said, watching Barry and Mackenzie argue playfully over paint colors. Some foundations don't need architectural plans. They just need time, trust, and maybe a little forgiveness. The house hummed around us, solid and secure, every beam and board exactly where it should be. Just like us.
The laughter and chatter around the table were abruptly cut short, replaced by a stunned silence that seemed to amplify the sound of beer dripping from my hair onto the floor. Tristan, my husband, stood opposite me, the empty beer can still in his hand, a smug grin fading from his face as he realized the gravity of what he'd just done. Meredith, I swear, it was just a joke. Tristan tried to defend himself, but the stern look on his father, Douglas's face, suggested this was no laughing matter. A joke? I echoed, my voice steady but seething with anger. Is this what our marriage has come to? Your idea of fun? Eliza, calm down, Meredith interjected, her tone dismissive, as if soaking your wife in beer was a trivial matter. Boys will be boys. That's enough. Douglas's voice boomed, slicing through the tension like a knife. Tristan, apologize to Eliza, now. Tristan's jaw clenched, and for a moment, I saw a flash of the man I thought I married, a man capable of respect, of love. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a scowl directed not at me, but at his father. I'm sorry, Eliza, he mumbled, the words empty, devoid of sincerity. The room fell into an uneasy silence, the incident laying bare the fractures within our family. Once, I had been a confident, independent woman, but now, living under Meredith and Douglas's roof, I felt like a shadow of my former self, trapped in a cycle of disrespect and enabling behavior. As the evening wore on, the incident with Tristan was glossed over, but the damage lingered, a stark reminder of the growing gulf between us. It wasn't just about the beer or the humiliation. It was about respect, about partnership. And as I lay in bed that night, beside a man who felt more like a stranger with each passing day, I wondered how we had gotten here, how I had allowed myself to become so lost. Douglas's reprimand of Tristan was a small spark in the darkness, a sign that not all was lost, that perhaps there was still hope for change. But as I drifted off to sleep, the laughter and mockery echoing in my mind, I realized that hope was a fragile thing, easily extinguished by the harsh reality of our lives. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of Douglas and Meredith arguing in hushed tones in the kitchen. He needs to grow up, Meredith. We can't keep coddling him. Douglas insisted. He's our son, Douglas. He's just going through a rough patch, Meredith countered, her voice laced with the same denial that had enabled Tristan's behavior for years. Listening to them, I felt a surge of determination. This was not the life I had envisioned for myself, not the partnership I had signed up for. It was time to make a change, to find my way back to the strong, independent woman I once was. But as I stood at the crossroads of my life, the path forward uncertain, I knew it would not be easy. The bonds of family, of marriage, were not easily broken, and the journey ahead promised to be fraught with challenges. Yet, in that moment, as I resolved to reclaim my life, I felt a spark of hope ignite within me, a spark that would, in time, become a blazing fire. The morning after the beer incident was like waking up to the aftermath of a storm. The house was silent, a stark contrast to the usual hum of activity. As I made my way to the kitchen, the memory of last night's humiliation clung to me like a second skin. But today, I refused to let it define me. I found Meredith at the stove, her back turned to me, the air around her thick with the scent of brewing coffee. "Good morning," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. Without turning, Meredith replied, "Coffee's almost ready." Her tone was neutral, as if last night had never happened. I poured myself a cup, the silence between us stretching uncomfortably. It was then Tristan walked in, his eyes barely meeting mine as he mumbled a good morning. The tension was palpable, a silent battle of wills taking place in the heart of our home. I wanted to scream, to shout, to make them see how their actions were tearing us apart. But I knew it would only fall on deaf ears. "Eliza, about last night," Tristan began, his voice trailing off as he searched for the right words. I cut him off, my patience worn thin. "Save it, Tristan. Your apologies mean nothing if your actions don't change." Meredith finally turned, her gaze sharp. "Eliza, don't talk to your husband that way. He's trying to apologize." Her words stung, a painful reminder of the chasm between us. An apology doesn't undo the disrespect, Meredith. Or do you think it's acceptable for a husband to treat his wife like that? Meredith's lips tightened into a thin line, her silence speaking volumes. The conversation was cut short by Douglas's entrance. His disapproving glance at Tristan was a small comfort, a sign that not everyone was blind to the injustices unfolding within these walls. Breakfast passed in silence, each of us lost in our own thoughts. It was a silence that screamed of broken bonds and unspoken resentments. The rest of the day passed in a blur of chores and strained interactions. It was during these moments of solitude that I allowed myself to reflect on my journey to this point. Once I had been full of dreams and ambitions, a young girl with the world at her feet. But somewhere along the way, I had lost myself in the role of the dutiful wife, my dreams sidelined by the needs of others. It was in these moments of reflection that the seeds of resentment began to grow, watered by the constant belittlement and disregard from Tristan and Meredith. Their words, meant to cut deep, only fueled my resolve to reclaim my independence, to prove that I was more than just an extension of their expectations. The day ended as it had begun, with a heavy silence hanging over the house. As I lay in bed next to Tristan, the distance between us felt insurmountable. I realized that the man lying next to me was a stranger, his once endearing quirks now sources of endless frustration. It was clear that something had to change. I could no longer continue living in the shadow of the person I used to be. The humiliation and disrespect had reached a boiling point, and I knew that if I didn't take action, I would be consumed by the bitterness that threatened to overwhelm me. As the night gave way to the early hours of the morning, a plan began to form in my mind. A plan to break free from the chains of this toxic environment, to take back control of my life. It was a daunting task, one that would require all the strength and determination I could muster. But as I drifted off to sleep, I knew it was the only way forward. The path to redemption was fraught with challenges, but I was ready to face them head-on, ready to fight for the future I deserved. The days that followed were a testament to the growing divide within our household. My role had shifted subtly yet significantly from partner to caretaker, not just of the home but increasingly of Douglas, whose health had begun to falter. This new responsibility was not one I shied away from. If anything, it provided a sense of purpose amidst the chaos. "Douglas, you need to eat something," I urged gently, presenting a plate of food to him. His once robust frame had become frail, a shadow of the man who had once commanded respect without uttering a word. "I'm not hungry, Eliza, but thank you," he replied, his voice weak but laced with gratitude. As I cared for Douglas, the criticism from Tristan and Meredith intensified, their barbs more pointed and frequent. "You're smothering him," Tristan would snap, watching with a critical eye as I helped his father navigate the stairs or take his medication. Meredith was no kinder. "You act like you're the only one who cares about him," she accused, her words dripping with disdain as she observed my attempts to make Douglas comfortable. Their cruelty was unrelenting, but my resolve to stand my ground did not waver. Amidst their contempt, a bond had formed between Douglas and me, forged in the quiet moments of care and understanding. It was during these times that Douglas would share stories of Tristan's childhood, painting a picture of a boy who had never faced consequences, his every whim indulged by Meredith's unwavering defense. "It wasn't always like this," Douglas confided one afternoon, a hint of sadness in his eyes. "But we let things go too far. Meredith couldn't bear to see him upset." I listened, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place, explaining the man Tristan had become. Despite the harsh reality of our situation, I found solace in Douglas's company, his wisdom a guiding light in the darkness that had enveloped our home. The tension reached a boiling point one evening, when a simple misunderstanding turned into a full-blown confrontation. In my haste to prepare dinner while attending to Douglas, I accidentally knocked over a glass of wine, staining the tablecloth Meredith cherished. "That's irreplaceable!" Meredith shrieked, her face contorted with rage as she surveyed the damage. "It was an accident, Meredith. I'll clean it up," I offered, reaching for a cloth, but Tristan blocked my path. "No, let her see what her carelessness has cost," he sneered, his voice cold and unforgiving. The room fell silent, the air thick with unspoken words and pent-up frustration. Douglas attempted to mediate, his voice a calming presence amidst the storm. "It's just a tablecloth. Let's not let this ruin our evening." But his words were like a match to kindling, igniting a firestorm of accusations and blame that left no one unscathed. Tristan and Meredith stood united in their disdain, their words cutting deeper than any physical wound could. That night, as I lay awake, the events of the evening replaying in my mind, I realized that my presence in this house was not just a burden to them. It was a mirror, reflecting their own failings and insecurities. The hostility I faced was a testament to their inability to confront the truth about themselves and their son. The bond I shared with Douglas, however, offered a glimmer of hope in the midst of despair. His appreciation for my care was a balm to the wounds inflicted by Tristan and Meredith's cruelty. It was this connection that sustained me, a reminder that kindness and understanding could still flourish even in the most toxic environments. As the days passed, my determination to rise above the hostility only grew stronger. The path ahead was fraught with obstacles, but I was no longer the woman who had walked into this house, meek and compliant. The fire within me had been ignited, fueled by injustice and cruelty, and I was ready to fight back, to claim the respect and dignity that was rightfully mine. The simmering discontent had reached its boiling point, and I knew that the time for action was drawing near. The atmosphere in the house grew heavier with each passing day, a storm cloud ready to burst. Despite the constant tension, I continued to navigate the choppy waters of our household dynamics, my resolve to maintain peace never waning. But as hard as I tried, the balance I sought seemed ever out of reach. The scales tipped too far by Tristan and Meredith's antagonism. It was during a particularly fraught dinner that the delicate balance we'd managed to uphold came crashing down. I had spent the afternoon preparing a meal, hoping to bring some semblance of normalcy to our fractured family. But as fate would have it, a simple mishap would serve as the catalyst for the evening's downfall. As I carried the dish to the table, my foot caught on the edge of the rug, sending me stumbling forward. The meal I had labored over landed in a heap on the floor, my efforts wasted. "Clumsy as ever," Tristan remarked with a sneer, his words cutting through the silence that followed my fall. Meredith's laughter echoed his contempt, her gaze upon me void of sympathy. "You can't do anything right, can you?" Douglas, ever the peacemaker, rose to my defense. "It was an accident. Eliza, are you all right?" But his concern was drowned out by the cacophony of blame and mockery from Tristan and Meredith. Their harsh words felt like physical blows, each one a reminder of the precarious position I held within this family. As I cleaned up the mess, the weight of their disdain pressing down on me, I couldn't help but wonder how much more I could endure. The incident at dinner was not an isolated one. It was a symptom of a much larger issue, a manifestation of the disrespect and malice that had become all too common. In the days that followed, Douglas attempted to mediate the growing rift between us. "We need to find a way to live together in peace," he pleaded, his voice weary from the constant conflict. But his efforts were met with resistance. Tristan and Meredith, united in their disdain for me, refused to see the part they played in the household's discord. Their blame was always directed outward, never inward. The tension reached a boiling point one evening when Tristan's cruelty took on a new form. Returning home late, he barged into the living room where I sat reading, his eyes alight with malice. "I suppose you've been lounging around all day, while the rest of us work," he accused, his words laced with venom. "I've been taking care of your father," I replied, my voice steady despite the anger boiling within me. Tristan's laugh was cold, devoid of humor. "My father doesn't need a nursemaid. He needs a family that doesn't include a freeloader." The insult stung, a bitter reminder of how low Tristan's opinion of me had sunk. But it also ignited a spark of defiance within me, a determination to no longer accept his abuse in silence. "Maybe if you showed a fraction of the concern for your father that I do, you'd understand the meaning of family," I shot back, my words a reflection of the frustration and hurt I had kept bottled up for too long. Tristan's response was a glare filled with hatred, a silent promise of further conflict. But in that moment I realized that I no longer feared his anger. The scales had tipped, and with them, my tolerance for the indignities I had suffered at the hands of Tristan and Meredith. As I went to bed that night, the events of the day replayed in my mind. The precarious balance we had maintained had been shattered, the pieces too scattered to ever be put back together. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges and confrontation. But one thing was clear. I could no longer stand idly by while Tristan and Meredith sought to diminish me. The time had come to take a stand, to fight back against the injustice that had become my daily reality. The battle lines were drawn, and though the road ahead was daunting, I was ready. Ready to reclaim my dignity, to assert my worth, and to fight for the respect I deserved. The storm that had been brewing was about to break, and I was no longer afraid to face it head on. The days melded into one another, each bringing its own set of challenges and confrontations. But nothing could have prepared me for the events that would ultimately serve as the catalyst for my transformation. It began like any other day, with the morning light creeping through the curtains and the house stirring to life. But the air was charged with a tension that hinted at the storm on the horizon. Breakfast was a silent affair, the clinking of cutlery against plates, the only sound breaking the uneasy quiet. Tristan and Meredith exchanged glances, their silent communication a language I had grown all too familiar with. Douglas, sensing the brewing storm, cast me a worried look, his concern a balm to my frayed nerves. It was not until later that morning that the dam finally broke. Tristan, emboldened by whatever grievance he had concocted in his mind, launched into an unprovoked tirade against me. "This is all your fault," he bellowed, his finger pointed accusingly in my direction. "You've turned my own parents against me." His words were absurd, a distortion of reality that bore no truth, but they were spoken with a conviction that belied their falsehood. "I've done nothing but support you and your family," I countered, my voice firm despite the shaking of my hands. "Support? You call this support?" Tristan's laugh was bitter, filled with contempt. "You've done nothing but bring discord into this house." Meredith, ever Tristan's ally, nodded in agreement. "You've overstayed your welcome, Eliza. It's time you realized that." The words were a slap in the face, a stark reminder of my precarious position within this family. But it was Douglas's response that marked the turning point. "Enough!" His voice, though weakened by illness, carried the weight of authority it once had. "Tristan, your behavior is unacceptable. Apologize to Eliza now." The room fell silent, the air thick with unspoken words and suppressed emotions. Tristan, faced with his father's rare admonishment, faltered. His face flushed with anger, he stormed out of the room, the slam of the door echoing like a gunshot. In the aftermath of Tristan's outburst, the reality of my situation became painfully clear. The family I had tried so hard to support, to be a part of, was irrevocably broken. And I, caught in the middle, had become the scapegoat for their frustrations and failings. Douglas's attempt to defend me, though heartening, was a stark reminder of the divisions that had formed. His words, though intended to mend, only served to widen the chasm between us. As I retreated to the sanctuary of my room, the events of the morning replaying in my mind, a resolve began to take shape. The humiliation and disrespect I had endured could no longer be brushed aside. It was time to take a stand, to fight back against the injustice that had become a constant in my life. The decision to leave, to extricate myself from this toxic environment, was not made lightly. But as I packed my belongings, each item a reminder of the life I had hoped to build here, I knew it was the only way forward. The confrontation with Tristan, the culmination of years of tension and resentment, was the last straw. It had shattered any illusions of reconciliation, of finding a place within this family. My path, once entwined with theirs, had diverged, leading me away from the pain and toward a future of my own making. As I closed the door behind me, the weight of my decision pressing down on me, I felt not sorrow, but a sense of liberation. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face them. Ready to reclaim my independence, to forge a new path based on respect and dignity. The chapter of my life entangled with Tristan and his family had come to a close, but as I stepped into the unknown, I did so with a newfound strength and determination. The battle may have been lost, but the war was far from over, and I, Eliza, was ready to fight for the life I deserved. The night air was cool against my skin as I walked away from the house that had been my prison for too long. The darkness seemed less daunting than the life I was leaving behind. My steps were uncertain, yet driven by a force stronger than fear, the desire for freedom and a fresh start. As I navigated the quiet streets, my phone vibrated in my pocket, pulling me back to the reality I was trying to escape. It was a message from a number I didn't recognize, but the content left no room for doubt about the sender. "Running away won't solve your problems, Eliza. You'll regret this." Tristan's words, even in text form, dripped with venom and the promise of retaliation. I quickened my pace, the threat igniting a spark of defiance within me. Tristan's attempts to intimidate me, to drag me back into the mire of his making, would not sway my resolve. I was done being a victim of his cruelty. The following day, the repercussions of my departure became apparent. News of Tristan's latest escapade, a drunken brawl at a local bar, spread through our small community like wildfire. The incident, which ended with his arrest, was the talk of the town, a public humiliation that laid bare the depths of his recklessness. I learned of the incident through hushed conversations at the cafe where I sought refuge, the whispers of the patrons a mixture of pity and schadenfreude. "Did you hear about Tristan? Completely lost it last night. They had to call the police," one woman said, her voice laced with a mix of shock and morbid fascination. The news, while shocking, was not surprising. Tristan's self-destructive behavior was a path he had chosen long ago, each act of defiance against decency and responsibility leading him inevitably to this point. But it was Douglas's reaction, conveyed to me through a brief, heart-wrenching phone call, that struck the deepest chord. "Eliza, I'm sorry. I never wanted it to come to this," he said, his voice a reflection of his shattered hopes for his son. The conversation was brief, the pain and disappointment palpable even through the phone line. Douglas's acknowledgement of Tristan's failings and his apology to me was a bittersweet vindication of my decision to leave. The fallout from Tristan's actions was swift and severe. His arrest and the subsequent legal troubles served as a form of instant karma, a reckoning for years of unchecked behavior. But while part of me felt vindicated, another part ached for Douglas, who bore the brunt of his son's disgrace. In the days that followed, my resolve to start anew was tested. The temptation to return, to offer support to Douglas in his time of need, was a constant battle. But I knew that going back would mean surrendering the hard-won ground I had gained in my fight for independence. As I struggled with my conscience, a chance encounter provided the clarity I needed. A former colleague, unaware of my personal turmoil, reached out with an opportunity that promised not just a new career, but a fresh start in a new city. The offer was a lifeline, a chance to escape the shadows of the past and build a future on my own terms. It was the sign I had been waiting for, the confirmation that my decision to leave was not just right, but necessary. With a heart heavy with mixed emotions, but a spirit buoyed by the prospect of a new beginning, I made my choice. The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but it was mine to walk, free from the chains of a toxic marriage and the specter of Tristan's downfall. As I packed my bags, ready to embark on this new journey, I realized that the night of repercussions was not just the end of one chapter, but the beginning of another. The drama and revenge that had marked my days with Tristan were behind me now, replaced by a sense of hope and the promise of redemption. The road ahead was long, and the wounds of the past would take time to heal. But as I stepped into the dawn of a new day, I did so with the knowledge that I was no longer defined by the failures of others. I was Eliza, strong, independent, and free at last. The new city welcomed me with open arms, its bustling streets and vibrant energy, a stark contrast to the life I had left behind. Here, in this place of new beginnings, I found the strength to rebuild, to carve out a space for myself that was untouched by the shadow of my past. But even as I embraced this fresh start, the specter of unfinished business loomed over me, a reminder that true freedom required confronting the demons I had fled. It was during this period of renewal that I received an unexpected call, one that would set the stage for the final act of my departure from Tristan's life. The voice on the other end was familiar, yet fraught with a desperation I had never heard before. "Eliza, it's Meredith. You need to come back. Tristan's in trouble, and he needs you." Her plea, laced with manipulation, was a tactic I had grown all too familiar with. "I'm not coming back, Meredith. Tristan's problems are his own making. He needs to face the consequences of his actions," I replied, my voice steady, a reflection of my newfound resolve. "But he's your husband." Meredith's voice cracked, the veneer of control giving way to panic. "He was my husband. That's in the past now." With those words, I ended the call, cutting the final thread that tied me to the life I once shared with Tristan. The news of Tristan's legal troubles had not gone unnoticed by me. His actions, once merely reckless, had spiraled into criminality, leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. It was a path that could only end in ruin, and I refused to be dragged down with him. In the wake of my decision, I took proactive steps to protect myself and ensure that Tristan would be held accountable for his actions. With the help of a skilled attorney, I began to compile evidence of Tristan's misdeeds, documents, and testimonies that painted a damning picture of the man I had once vowed to stand by. The process was grueling, a dredging up of memories I had fought hard to bury. But with each piece of evidence I gathered, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders, a sense of empowerment that came from taking control of my narrative. As the case against Tristan began to take shape, an unlikely ally emerged. Douglas, disillusioned by his son's behavior and Meredith's denial, reached out to me with an offer of support. "Eliza, I can't undo the past, but I want to help make things right," he said, his voice heavy with regret. Douglas's support was a turning point, a sign that justice, though long delayed, was finally within reach. Together, we presented a united front, a testament to the fact that Tristan's actions could no longer be swept under the rug. The legal battle that ensued was a public spectacle, a fall from grace that stripped Tristan of his ability to harm those around him. The evidence we had gathered was irrefutable, leading to a conviction that would see Tristan facing the consequences of his actions for years to come. As I stood outside the courthouse, the final verdict ringing in my ears, I felt a mixture of relief and sorrow. Relief that the ordeal was over, and sorrow for the family that had been irrevocably broken by one man's selfishness. The journey to this point had been fraught with pain and hardship. But as I looked to the future, I did so with a heart unburdened by the past. The revenge I had sought was not one of malice, but of justice, a reclaiming of my dignity and a declaration that I would no longer be a victim. The turning point had come and gone, leaving in its wake a path to a new life, one filled with hope and the promise of healing. And as I walked away from the courthouse that day, I knew that the next chapter of my story would be written on my terms, free from the shadows of yesterday. The courtroom's heavy doors closed behind me with a finality that echoed through my very core. The legal battle was over, and with it, a chapter of my life that had been marked by struggle and pain. The city around me bustled with life, indifferent to the monumental shift that had just occurred within those courtroom walls. Yet, for me, the world seemed different now, colored by the promise of new beginnings and the sweet, hard-won taste of freedom. In the days that followed, I found myself walking the streets of my new city with a lighter step, each day unwrapping itself like a gift. The job that had once seemed like a mere escape now flourished into a promising career, my efforts acknowledged and my talents nurtured. It was in this environment of support and respect that I rediscovered my passion and purpose, the dark cloud of my past slowly receding into the background. But it wasn't just my professional life that had undergone a transformation. The solitude that had once been my constant companion was gradually replaced by a network of friends and colleagues, relationships built on mutual respect and shared experiences. It was during one such gathering, a casual dinner with friends, that I met Alex. Alex's entrance into my life was unassuming, a slow burn that gradually evolved into something deep and meaningful. Our conversations flowed effortlessly, a dance of words and laughter that filled the spaces in my heart I hadn't realized were empty. With Alex, I found not just love, but a partnership built on trust, understanding, and an unwavering support that I had once thought impossible to find. As my relationship with Alex grew, so too did my sense of self. The insecurities and fears that had once held sway over me began to fade, replaced by a confidence and strength that I wore like a mantle. I was no longer the woman who had walked away from Tristan and his toxic influence. I was someone new, someone reborn from the ashes of my past. Yet, even as I embraced this new chapter, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought me here. The fight for justice against Tristan had been arduous, a battle that had tested my limits and forced me to confront the darkest parts of my soul. But it was a battle I had won, not just in the courtroom, but within myself. The karmic justice that had befallen Tristan was a distant memory, a chapter closed and locked away. Meredith's attempts to reach out, to bridge the chasm that had formed between us, were met with polite indifference. The family I had once longed to be a part of was now just a footnote in my story, a reminder of the trials I had overcome. As for Douglas, our relationship had evolved into one of mutual respect and understanding. His support during the trial had been a beacon of hope, a reminder that not all was lost in the wake of Tristan's destruction. We remained in contact, a tentative connection that served as a testament to our shared history and the resilience of the human spirit. The new dawn that had risen on the horizon of my life was bright with possibility, its light casting long shadows over the remnants of my past. I had emerged from the crucible of my experiences a stronger, more resilient person, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. And as I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, the city sprawling before me, I realized that this was not just a new chapter, but a whole new book waiting to be written. My story, once defined by drama and revenge, was now a tale of triumph and renewal, a narrative of my own making. With Alex by my side and a future unburdened by the past stretching out before us, I knew that anything was possible. The pain and turmoil that had once defined my existence were now just echoes, faint reminders of how far I had come. This was my new dawn, my chance to live a life defined not by what I had endured, but by what I had overcome. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I knew that I was finally home. Sitting in the dimly lit living room, I clutched a photo of my late husband, Elliot. The silence was only broken by the soft ticking of the grandfather clock, a constant reminder of the time that had slipped away since his passing. Across from me, Helena, my mother-in-law, sat knitting quietly. Her presence always brought a comforting sense of stability. The door swung open, shattering the stillness. Raymond, my new husband, strode in with a grin that stretched ear to ear. "Cora, you won't believe what I've found." His voice was laced with excitement. I looked up, my heart heavy. "What is it, Raymond?" "It's a mansion, Cora. A magnificent mansion. Just imagine us living there. It's only $3 million, a steal for a place like that." His eyes sparkled with a fervor that I hadn't seen before. "A mansion?" My voice was a mere whisper, disbelief coloring my tone. "Raymond, how could we possibly afford that?" He leaned in, his smile widening. "We'll use the insurance money from Elliot. It's perfect." The room seemed to spin. That money was all I had left of Elliot. "But that money, it's meant for my future security," I managed to say, gripping the photo tighter. "Cora, darling, it's just money, and what better way to use it than to secure our luxurious future?" Raymond's dismissiveness struck a nerve. Helena stopped knitting, her gaze sharp. "Raymond, that money was meant for Cora's well-being, not for such extravagance." He dismissed her with a wave of his hand. "Helena, you worry too much. It's a good investment. Cora agrees with me, right?" I felt cornered, his expectant eyes pressing down on me. Memories of Elliot, our dreams and love, seemed to be fading away, overshadowed by Raymond's grand plans. "Raymond, do we really need something so extravagant?" My voice shook, betraying my inner turmoil. "Trust me, Cora. This is our future. A new beginning," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. I glanced at the photo in my hands, then at Raymond's eager face, and finally at Helena. Her expression held concern and a hint of disappointment. Doubt crept into my heart, a growing sense that the life I had envisioned with Raymond was slipping through my fingers like grains of sand. I tried to make peace with the decision, but the mansion loomed in my mind like a gilded cage. The following weeks were a blur of Raymond making arrangements. He seemed oblivious to my growing unease and Helena's silent disapproval. One evening, as I was setting the table for dinner, Raymond's daughter, Nora, came into the kitchen. At 17, she carried a rebellious streak that made her hard to connect with. "So we're moving into a mansion, huh?" she said, her tone laced with a sarcasm that I wasn't prepared for. "Yes, it seems so," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. Nora leaned against the counter, eyeing me with a mix of curiosity and disdain. Must be nice, stepping up in the world thanks to someone else's money. Her words stung, and I struggled to maintain my composure. "Nora, it's not like that. It's complicated." "Sure, whatever you say, Cora," she dismissed, grabbing an apple and leaving the room as abruptly as she had entered. That night, Raymond was unusually quiet at dinner. Helena barely spoke, her disapproval of the situation hanging heavily in the air. The tension was palpable. After dinner, Raymond cornered me in the living room. "Cora, we need to talk about the house. There are some papers that need your signature." I tensed. "Papers? What kind of papers?" Just some formalities for the purchase. You know, since it's your money that's paying for it, he said casually. My heart raced. Raymond, I'm not comfortable with this. It's all happening so fast. He frowned, his patience wearing thin. Cora, we've been over this. It's a great opportunity. Don't be so sentimental about the money. But it's not just the money, Raymond. It's what it represents, I protested, my voice rising. He stepped closer, his expression hardening. Cora, you're my wife. It's your duty to support my decisions. We're doing this, and that's final. I recoiled from his words. They felt like a betrayal, a stark reminder of how little he respected me or my feelings. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, feeling trapped in a life that was spiraling out of my control. The day we moved into the mansion was surreal. The grandeur of the place couldn't mask the hollow feeling in my heart. Raymond was like a child, gleaming with pride, while Helena's sadness was palpable, her usual warmth replaced by a cold resignation. I was arranging some books in the living room when Raymond strutted in, his demeanor more arrogant than ever. Cora, now that we're here, there are going to be some changes, he declared, a smug smile playing on his lips. I paused, a sense of dread washing over me. What kind of changes? Well, for starters, I think it's only fitting that you take care of the house. After all, a mansion needs a proper housekeeper, he said, his eyes gleaming with a cruel amusement. I stared at him, disbelief and anger mingling in my chest. You want me to be the housekeeper? In my own home? He laughed, a cold, heartless sound. Your home? No, Cora, this is my house. You're just living in it. And as for being a housekeeper, well, it's not like you have much else to do. I felt a surge of anger. Raymond, I am your wife, not your servant. His expression turned icy. You're whatever I say you are. And right now, I say you're the housekeeper. You should be grateful I'm even allowing you to stay here. Helena, having overheard the conversation, entered the room, her expression a mixture of fury and disbelief. Raymond, you can't be serious. Treating Cora like this, it's inhumane. He turned to Helena, his eyes cold. And you, Helena, I don't even know why you're still here. You're not my family. Frankly, you're just a burden. The words cut through the air like a knife. I could see the pain in Helena's eyes, the insult too much to bear. We were both prisoners in a gilded cage, our dignity stripped away by a man we once trusted. That night, as I lay in bed, the mansion felt more like a tomb. Raymond's true nature had revealed itself, a monster hiding behind a mask of charm. I realized then that I couldn't live like this, not under his control. A plan began to form in my mind, a way to escape this nightmare. Revenge wasn't just a fleeting thought anymore. It was a necessity. The days that followed were a blur of emotional turmoil. Raymond's tyranny over the house grew each day, and his disdain for both Helena and me became more blatant. It was during these dark days that Helena and I found solace in each other's company, plotting our escape from this gilded prison. One evening, as we sat in the dimly lit kitchen, Helena spoke up, her voice steady but filled with resolve. Cora, we can't live like this any longer. We need to leave, to find our own way. I nodded, feeling a spark of hope amidst the despair. I've been thinking the same, Helena, but where would we go? Raymond has control over everything. Helena reached across the table, taking my hand. The insurance money, Cora, we use it to buy a place of our own, a condo, something modest but ours. We leave Raymond and this mansion behind. The idea was daring, almost reckless, but it ignited a fire within me. But the money, it's tied up in this mansion now, I said, the weight of our situation pressing down on me. Helena shook her head. No, my dear, only a portion of it. There's still enough left. We were careful, remember? We can do this. The plan was simple yet bold. We would secretly purchase a condo, a place where we could start anew, free from Raymond's shadow. The thought of taking back control, of reclaiming my life, was exhilarating. Over the next few weeks, we moved cautiously, meeting with real estate agents and lawyers under the guise of mundane errands. Each step we took was a step closer to freedom. The day we signed the papers for the condo was a day of quiet triumph. Raymond, lost in his own egotistical world, remained oblivious to our plans. The night before we were set to leave, I couldn't sleep. The anticipation of a new beginning, mixed with the fear of Raymond's reaction, kept me awake. I knew the confrontation would be inevitable and likely explosive. As dawn broke, I packed my bags, my hands trembling with a mixture of fear and excitement. Helena was already waiting for me, her bags packed, her face determined. "We can do this, Cora. It's time," she said, her voice a mix of courage and defiance. I nodded, taking a deep breath. "Let's go. Let's take back our lives." We left the mansion quietly, slipping away into the early morning light. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it was ours to shape. Settling into the condo felt like a breath of fresh air. Helena and I reveled in our newfound freedom, the weight of Raymond's oppression lifting from our shoulders. However, I knew this peace would be short-lived once Raymond discovered our absence. It wasn't long before my phone rang, Raymond's name flashing on the screen. Taking a deep breath, I braced myself and answered. "Where the hell are you?" Raymond's voice was a mix of rage and disbelief. "I've left, Raymond. Helena and I both have." "We're not coming back," I said, my voice steady despite the racing of my heart. "You what? You can't just leave. That house, it's in your name, the bills, everything." His voice was frantic, tinged with panic. "That's no longer my concern. I won't be a part of your twisted game any longer," I replied, feeling a surge of empowerment with each word. "You ungrateful. Do you have any idea what you've done? You'll ruin me." Raymond's voice was rising, his words laced with venom. "That was never my intention, Raymond, but I refuse to be your prisoner, your housekeeper. I deserve better, and so does Helena," I said firmly. There was a pause, and I could almost hear the gears turning in Raymond's mind. "You'll pay for this, Cora. You think you can just walk away? I'll make sure you regret this." I felt a chill at his words, but my resolve was unshaken. "I'm not afraid of you anymore, Raymond. Goodbye." With that, I hung up, cutting off his tirades. In the following days, Raymond's attempts to contact me became more desperate. He left voicemails, each more aggressive than the last, demanding that I return and fix the mess I had left behind. But I was done being his victim. Each message he left only strengthened my resolve. Helena and I started to rebuild our lives, our bond stronger than ever. The news eventually came that Raymond was facing financial ruin. The mansion, with its exorbitant costs, had become his undoing. His social standing crumbled as the truth of his behavior, and our departure became known. I felt a mix of vindication and sadness. Raymond had brought this upon himself, yet I couldn't help but feel a pang of pity. He was a man undone by his own greed and cruelty. But this was his battle to fight, not mine. Helena and I had chosen a different path, one of freedom and dignity. We had escaped the shadow of the mansion, and in its place, we found light. Life in the condo with Helena was serene, a stark contrast to the turmoil we had left behind. Our days were filled with small joys and newfound freedoms. Yet, the shadow of Raymond still lingered in the back of my mind, an uncomfortable reminder of the past. One evening, as Helena and I enjoyed coffee in our cozy living room, my phone rang. Seeing Raymond's name on the screen again made my heart sink. "Hello, Raymond," I said, steeling myself for another barrage of insults. "Cora, please, you have to help me." Raymond's voice was different this time, tinged with desperation. "Help you? Raymond, after everything, why would I ever—" I started, but he cut me off. "The mansion, it's falling apart. I can't afford the upkeep, the taxes. I'm drowning here. I need you to come back. We can start over," he pleaded. Start over? The audacity of his request left me speechless. The man who had tried to reduce me to a housekeeper now wanted salvation from me. "Raymond, I'm not coming back. You made your bed, now lie in it," I said firmly. "But Cora, I'm nothing without you. You don't understand the mess I'm in. Please." His voice cracked, a far cry from the domineering man I once knew. "Raymond, you chose this path. You chose to treat me and Helena like we were disposable. You can't expect me to fix the consequences of your actions," I replied, my voice unwavering. There was a heavy silence on the line before Raymond spoke again, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry, Cora. I never meant for things to go this far. I miss you." His words, laden with regret, might have once moved me, but now they only served as a reminder of the pain he had caused. "Goodbye, Raymond," I said, hanging up the phone. Helena, who had been listening, reached over and squeezed my hand. "You did the right thing, Cora. We have each other, and that's all we need." As I looked around our modest condo, I realized she was right. We had escaped Raymond's clutches and found something far more valuable: peace, independence, and a bond that no amount of money could buy. Raymond's downfall was of his own making, a result of his greed and cruelty, It was a harsh lesson in karma, one that he would have to learn on his own. Helena and I turned our gaze towards the future, one filled with hope and free from the shadows of the past. We had each other, and that was more than enough. My breath caught in my throat as I opened the door. There stood my ex-husband Ellis, as infuriatingly handsome as ever, and next to him his imposingly stern mother Lorraine. "What the hell are you doing here?" I demanded, blocking their entry. Ellis flashed his signature dazzling smile. "Aren't you going to invite us in, Bryn?" I crossed my arms. "Absolutely not. How did you even know where I lived?" Lorraine huffed indignantly. "We asked your sister, though I can't fathom why she'd tell us after how dreadful you treated our Ellis." My jaw dropped in disbelief. The audacity! I straightened my back and met Lorraine's glare. "You have 10 seconds to explain yourselves before I call security." "Bryn, dear, no need for threats," Ellis interjected gently. "We merely want to discuss our living arrangements now that the unnecessary hostility from our split has faded." "Living arrangements? Is he serious?" He stood there perfectly poised in his designer suit, as if this were a business deal. I almost laughed at the sheer lunacy. "Ellis, if you think for 1 second that I'd ever allow you back into my life—" "We understand you're still emotional," Lorraine interrupted, "which is why Ellis and I have decided I will move in as well temporarily to ease the transition." Transition? Now I knew they'd lost their minds. I stepped forward, backing them towards the elevator. "Let me make this crystal clear. There is nothing to transition back to. We are divorced." Ellis's smile faded, his voice taking on a hint of steel. "Don't be rash, Bryn. You may regret it." "A warning? From him?" My temper flared. "The only thing I regret is wasting years married to you. Now get out before I call security and the police." I jabbed angrily at the elevator button. The doors slid open and I motioned brusquely for them to leave. Ellis hesitated, then stepped in, Lorraine close behind. As the doors began closing, Ellis called out, "Remember, Bryn, you forced my hand." I caught my breath, pulse racing. Forced his hand? The veiled threat hung in the air. I had no doubt Ellis was ruthless enough to follow through if I didn't act first. I strode rapidly back into my condo, locking the door. I wouldn't put it past them to try to re-enter while I was distracted. I poured myself a shaking glass of wine, equal parts furious and unnerved. So this was Ellis's endgame. He likely assumed the divorce left me broken, expecting me to cave to his demands. He always did underestimate me. I downed the wine in one long swallow. Well, not this time. If it was a war Ellis wanted, then it was war he would get, and I refused to lose. I downed my second glass of wine, still reeling from the morning's confrontation. Ellis's parting words haunted me. Forced his hand? What exactly was he planning? My phone buzzed. It was a text from Lorraine. "We need to discuss this further. Expect us at 7 p.m. "The hell you will," I shouted at the phone. I fired off a reply. "Do not come here or I will call the police. This is harassment." Her response was swift. "Don't be dramatic. We just want to talk." "You owe it to Ellis after everything you put him through." I threw the phone down in disgust. Everything I put him through? The years of subtle neglect, the selfishness, the cavalier infidelity, that was all on him, and his viper of a mother encouraging it every step of the way. No, this little visit was the last straw. I wouldn't sit back and let them bulldoze over me anymore. If Ellis wanted war, I would bring it right to his doorstep. I began gathering every sordid detail I could on Ellis. I called old friends, colleagues, anyone who I thought might have dirt on him, and dirt I got. Ellis's law partners hinted at shady financial dealings. Old flames alluded to affairs. I even learned of recent harassment allegations from his young, attractive assistant Jenna. My anger burned hotter with each new discovery. Not only was Ellis a cheating snake, but a ruthless, corrupt one at that. By 5 p.m., I had compiled a stockpile of incriminating evidence. My phone buzzed again. My mouth twisted in disgust seeing it was another message from Lorraine. "We'll be there at 7 whether you like it or not. I have already made up the guest room for Ellis. My son deserves to be comfortable." Comfortable? I would make sure he and his despicable mother were anything but. At 6:55 p.m. sharp, I headed down to the lobby, a satisfied smile on my face. Right on cue, the elevator doors slid open. Lorraine strode out first, her pinched face set in a haughty sneer. Ellis slunk behind, his eyes widening when he saw me waiting for them. Before either could speak, I held up a hand. I have had quite enough of this little charade. If you try and harass me again, I'll make sure you regret it. I locked eyes with Ellis. You have no idea what I'm capable of. His cocky grin faltered. I pressed my advantage and stepped forward, glaring menacingly. I promise you, keep this up, and I'll bring your entire world crashing down. My voice shook with rage. Without waiting for a reply, I turned on my heels and left them gaping speechlessly. I had declared my war in no uncertain terms. I almost pitied Ellis. He had poked a sleeping dragon, and my fury was just beginning to wake. I arrived at my lawyer's office, files in hand, ready to launch the opening salvos of my war against Ellis. His threats still rang in my ears, fueling my determination. If he thought I would just stand by, he was dead wrong. Bryn, always a pleasure, greeted Jacob, my seasoned attorney. We exchanged quick pleasantries before I eagerly presented my findings. I wanted to wipe that smug grin off Ellis's face permanently. This is quite an impressive dossier, Jacob remarked, pages spread across his desk. Extensive evidence of financial malfeasance, sexual harassment allegations. He peered up, eyebrow raised. Do you intend to pursue legal action? Absolutely. I want to hit Ellis where it hurts. His money and his beloved career. My voice dripped with contempt. I'll bleed him dry if I have to. Jacob clasped his hands, eyeing me seriously. An aggressive approach, but not unwarranted given the circumstances. He detailed a crushing lawsuit targeting Ellis's assets and law license. My pulse quickened as he described levying accusation after accusation, toppling the empire Ellis had built on lies. I left Jacob's office charged with predatory purpose. The battlefield was set, and I would emerge victorious, no matter the cost. Ellis had awoken the beast inside me, and I would have my revenge. That evening I received a series of desperate texts from Ellis. We need to talk. Lorraine is frantic. She invested her life savings in my latest development project, and now the funding has collapsed. We're facing financial ruin if I can't access additional capital right away. Please, I'm begging you. I stared coldly at his groveling messages. Ruin? He didn't know the meaning of the word. But he would soon enough. Bryn, please, Lorraine refuses to speak to me. You know how she gets. I swear I'll pay you back once this deal gets back on track. Sneering, I began typing a response when my phone suddenly rang. It was Ellis, likely calling to pathetically plead his case further. What? I answered sharply. Bryn, thank God, Ellis's voice wavered desperately. I know things ended badly between us, but you must help me. Must help him? I almost laughed at his audacity. In the background, I could hear Lorraine's shrill voice. If you can't fix this, Ellis, you're no son of mine. I'd heard enough. Ellis, our relationship died the second you betrayed our marriage vows the first time. I want nothing more to do with you or that harpy you call a mother. The line went silent except for Lorraine's strangled gasps. Good, let them drown in panic. Please, Bryn, Ellis implored weakly. I'll tell you exactly what you can do, Ellis, I interrupted. You can sign these divorce papers and terminate all contact. Maybe then I'll consider not ruining what's left of your career. Checkmate. The battle lines were drawn and my artillery was locked on target, now to fire at will. The silence on the line felt endless as I awaited Ellis's response. Finally, in a broken whisper, I heard him utter, "As you wish, I will sign the papers." His defeated words were sweet satisfaction. I promptly received the signed divorce decree, granting me a clean break along with a substantial settlement befitting my suffering. As an added bonus, Ellis included a sworn affidavit confessing to multiple infidelities. My lips curled maliciously reading his written admission of guilt. It would come in useful later to annihilate any remaining sympathy for him. I decided to also pursue action against his law license. Just because I had won my freedom didn't mean Ellis deserved to walk away unscathed. His beloved career would be the next casualty in my war against him. Over the following weeks, Jacob and I meticulously prepared complaint letters to the State Ethics Committee documenting Ellis's confessed adultery and chronicling accounts of his shady financial dealings. This will undoubtedly trigger an official investigation based on the severity of accusations, Jacob commented as we finalized the exhaustive records. It won't be pleasant for him. These committees rarely show mercy, especially with the hard evidence we're providing. Good, I thought, coldly. Let him be raked over the coals. He didn't deserve mercy or even basic compassion after what he did to me. Soon after submitting the complaints, I received satisfying updates of their swift and devastating impact. Ellis was placed under immediate review at his firm and barred from taking on new clients amidst the swirling accusations. Lorraine also kept involuntarily involving herself, as I knew she would. She left me endless raging voicemails when the ethics investigation was announced, blaming me for trying to destroy Ellis over nothing. Destroy him? Oh, I was just getting started. Her shrill accusations only strengthened my resolve. When Lorraine finally had the nerve to show up pounding at my door, I quickly put her in her place. "This is all your fault, you deceitful bitch," she screamed when I opened the door. Before she could spit anything else, I stepped forward and struck her sharply across the face. She staggered backwards in shock, eyes filling with tears. "Get the hell out, and if you ever come here again, the next slap will draw blood." I spat vehemently, slamming the door on her stunned face. Immediately, I filed for restraining orders against the both of them. I wanted the protection of the law to cement my separation from their toxicity. In the following weeks, every update Jacob sent regarding Ellis's deteriorating reputation and mounting legal troubles filled me with fierce satisfaction. With each judgment against him, with each damning headline, I could practically hear the foundations of his world cracking and crumbling. Good riddance. He was finally getting what he deserved. As I stood on my balcony overlooking the dazzling cityscape, I raised my wine glass in celebration. The view now perfectly symbolized my hard-won victory, rising high above the ruins of Ellis and Lorraine, exactly where I belonged. The sharp clack of high heels in my marble foyer pulled my eyes from the jaw-dropping view. I turned with a scowl, assuming it was Lorraine again attempting to barge in despite strict security protocol. But my glare transformed instantly to shock when instead I saw Ellis's young assistant Jenna striding towards me, fiery determination in her eyes. My surprise quickly shifted to anger. "How the hell did you get in here?" I demanded. She waved a keycard dismissively. "I have my methods, but that's not important." "Breaking into my home sure seems pretty damn important," I retorted. Ignoring me, Jenna declared, "I'm here to discuss Ellis." That got my attention. I crossed my arms skeptically. She took a breath. "You should know, Ellis and I are seeing each other. Have been for a while, actually." Seeing each other? Why wasn't I surprised? Ellis always did have a penchant for screwing young subordinates. First his pathetic associate at his old firm and now his new assistant. Despicable but almost impressive in the sheer audacity. I raised an eyebrow. So the harassment claims against him were what? Foreplay? Jenna flushed angrily. "No, I really was upset with him at first. The way he pursued me was so aggressive and manipulative." Her voice trailed off. Interesting. I wondered what lies Ellis had fed her to get into her pants. Jenna finally met my gaze. "But over time he made me feel so special, like I was the only one who really knew the real him, you know?" I stared at her blankly. Oh, I knew the real Ellis, all right, a selfish, sneaky scumbag. But I bit my tongue, curious where Jenna was going with this sob story. Haltingly, she continued. "The point is, I think I love him, and I want to help fix this situation with you and his mother." Fix this? I almost burst out laughing. There was no fix for what Ellis had done, but Jenna's hopeful eyes stopped my bitter response. "Ellis says if you two could just talk," she trailed off hopefully. Now I did laugh harshly. "Jenna, listen closely. There is nothing on earth that could convince me to willingly speak to Ellis again." I sighed, seeing her face fall. "I know you think you see something special in Ellis, but take it from his ex-wife. That man doesn't have a sincere bone in his body." Jenna's lip quivered. For a moment, I almost pitied her. Clearly Ellis had spun an expert web of lies and empty promises, just as he had with me years ago. Straightening sharply, I opened the door and motioned for her to leave. "Go find someone who treats you with genuine care, Jenna. Ellis isn't capable of that." Her eyes watering, Jenna hurried out without another word. I firmly shut the door behind her. Sighing deeply, I leaned against it for support. Oh yes, Ellis certainly had a type, young, naive, and vulnerable. Well, his new plaything was about to get a brutal life lesson about the true ugliness lying underneath Ellis's polished veneer, a lesson I knew all too well. In the weeks following Jenna's unexpected visit, I immersed myself in work, trying to forget the latest absurd drama. I had just secured a major promotion validating years of tireless effort. I wouldn't let Ellis undermine all I had achieved. That resolve wavered when I arrived home one evening to find Lorraine lurking yet again outside my building, still somehow evading security. Her piercing voice cut through the night air before I could avoid her. "I hope you're satisfied with yourself," she seethed. "Ellis is at risk of losing everything because of your petty grudge." Petty grudge? I marched up to her menacingly as she continued her tirade against me, jabbing her bony finger in my face. I'd had enough. With one forceful shove, I knocked her back against the brick exterior. She yelped painfully. "If you harass me again, they'll be carting you out of here in a body bag," I growled through gritted teeth. "Stay the hell away from me." I stormed off, leaving Lorraine sputtering furiously. My phone soon buzzed with her incensed texts. "When Ellis finds out about this, it will just further motivate him to destroy you at any cost." Good luck with that, I thought acidly. Though the threat gave me pause, I knew Ellis was ruthless enough to make good if desperate. Over the next week I learned things had only gotten worse for him professionally. The ethics investigation was in full swing, more sordid details emerging, including confirmation Ellis had pilfered client funds for his failed developments. Partners were fleeing his firm and creditors were hounding him relentlessly. His personal life fared no better. Jenna had moved out abruptly, presumably finally waking up to reality. Ellis was unraveling rapidly. When I arrived at my office one morning, my receptionist's uneasy expression immediately put me on edge. "What's going on, Gwen?" She wrung her hands nervously. "There's someone waiting for you, Jenna. She's extremely upset." "Jenna again? What now?" I hurried to my office to find Jenna sobbing uncontrollably, mascara streaking her inflamed face. "Jenna, what happened?" I asked warily. "It's Ellis," she choked out. "I went by his place to talk, and he was just destroying everything in a drunken rage." She buried her face in her hands as a fresh wave of hysteria overcame her. I sank down beside her and spoke evenly. "Jenna, listen, when people show you who they are, believe them the first time." I recounted my own painful history with Ellis's vindictive anger. Jenna lifted her head slowly, eyes widening with revelation. "Oh my God, Bryn, I am so sorry," she whimpered. "This whole time I thought you were just vengeful, but now I see Ellis clearly for the monster he is." I nodded gravely as she divulged new information on Ellis's violence and manipulation against her, cementing his abusive patterns. As Jenna composed herself, we agreed to coordinate with authorities on appropriate restraining actions. For her sake and mine, Ellis needed to face consequences. The law was about to get its claws in Ellis in more ways than he ever imagined, and I would not relent until he was shredded to pieces. I observed with quiet satisfaction as two uniformed officers firmly led a disheveled and belligerent Ellis down the precinct stairwell in handcuffs. His bellowing denials echoed through the cavernous atrium. Once outside, Ellis collapsed against the cruiser, appearing on the verge of hysterics. Good, I thought coldly, watching the bizarre scene through the station windows. Let him finally experience even a fraction of the torment he had so callously inflicted. I had coordinated closely with Jenna as well as Jacob to pursue immediate legal action against Ellis for assault, abuse, and violations of our restraining orders. The detailed accounts of his violence and manipulation left authorities with little recourse but to arrest him. That gratifying image was just the beginning. Over subsequent weeks, I was regular fixture at the courthouse, bearing witness to the comprehensive dismantling of Ellis's life. The ethics committee convened intense hearings, poring through reams of records I had supplied confirming not just Ellis's adulterous behavior, but willful professional misconduct. Account statements showed substantial sums Ellis had funneled from client estates into his own failed ventures. An open and shut case of embezzlement. I observed silently as Ellis took the stand, clamoring fruitlessly to defend himself. The prosecution interrogated him ruthlessly until he crumbled, admitting defeat. The slimy Ellis I had known had vanished, replaced by a shell of a man, broken and destitute. I couldn't tear my eyes away. The final nail in the coffin came days later. Formal notice of Ellis's disbarment. No more practicing law ever again. As Jacobs reviewed next steps, including potential jail time based on criminal financial charges, I saw years' worth of anguish finally lifting. I had won. Leaving the courthouse, I practically floated down the steps before a shrill cry of despair jarred me. Lorraine. In my satisfaction, I had almost forgotten about her. I watched, curious, as she desperately shoved through the crowd of reporters searching for Ellis. She finally spotted him retreating hastily towards a waiting town car. "Ellis!" Lorraine cried pitifully, chasing after him. "You can't abandon me! I gave up everything for you." Ellis yanked the car door open angrily. "You and your foolish ambitions got me into this mess. I want nothing more to do with you," he spat venomously. The car sped off, leaving Lorraine standing alone, crestfallen. My heart almost went out to her before I swiftly quashed the thought. She deserved this too for enabling Ellis at every turn. I strode straight past Lorraine's hunched form without a word. I had finally excised their poison from my life completely. Glancing back, I saw Lorraine turn slowly, her sunken eyes meeting mine one last time, filled with pain and true understanding of betrayal. I held her gaze indifferently, then shifted away. The hot sun beat down on me as I departed, but I had never felt such lightness. True justice was done. Now to live my life wholly and completely free. Sighing deeply, I sank back into my office chair, basking in the glow of a radiant sunset bathing downtown in golden hues. I glanced contentedly around the spacious corner suite, a visible testament to my professional successes since leaving Ellis's toxicity behind. I had swiftly risen through the executive ranks to spearhead major marketing campaigns that propelled our firm to record profits. Recognition followed, including well-deserved promotions and industry accolades, affirming my strong leadership vision. Gone were the days of simmering resentment and emotional turmoil that had defined my marriage to Ellis. In its place now stood confidence, self-assuredness, and clarity of purpose. I embraced my seat at the table and reveled in hard-won autonomy. The board was even grooming me for an imminent CEO role, acknowledging my instrumental role in recent triumphs. My throat tightened unexpectedly with emotion. God knows Ellis and Lorraine would have ruthlessly exploited my position and earnings for their own selfish agenda, just as ruthlessly as they had our marriage. Now there were no parasitic ties hindering my ascent. I had clawed my way to the top alone on sheer grit and refusal to be defeated. And I was just getting started. A light rap at my door pulled me from my thoughts. I waved my assistant Devon in cheerfully. His amiable competence and organization were indispensable. "Here is the market analysis you requested," he said, handing me a freshly bound presentation. "Also, your guest has arrived downstairs." I smiled broadly, heart quickening. "Excellent. Send him up, please." Moments later, I heard a firm knock. I opened the door to find Ryan standing there, looking striking as ever in a tailored suit, his warm brown eyes crinkling into a smile as he gave me quick kiss. His stable warmth was exactly what I needed after years wedded to Ellis's turbulent chaos. We reconnected by coincidence when Ryan joined the firm's legal team, finding chemistry still lingered from our college days. An easy rapport quickly blossomed into a blossoming relationship on my terms and timing. Ryan was more than willing to accommodate, showing genuine care and respect. No pressure, no suffocation, just unwavering support. I invited Ryan to sit on the plush sectional and popped a celebratory bottle of Dom Perignon I had been saving for this special milestone. I regaled him with the latest positive developments, confidence growing with each effervescent sip. Ryan listened attentively, interjecting words of encouragement and pride in my accomplishments. I realized suddenly I hadn't felt this secure in my entire adult life. Ryan wrapped his arms around me reassuringly, as if reading my thoughts. No, with him I had found an equal partnership, one grounded in trust and healthy boundaries, the very foundation Ellis had torpedoed. Gazing out at the glittering skyline abuzz with possibility, I nestled contentedly into Ryan's sturdy embrace. The sweet taste of triumph filled my mouth, more rich and satisfying than the finest champagne. I had awoken from the nightmare years ago. Now at long last I could bask fully in the dawn of blissful new beginnings.
The day my father stole my savings, I wasn't even surprised. I stood in his office, staring at the bank statement in my trembling hands, and all I could think was, of course he'd do this to me. My name is Jayla, and I've spent 28 years being the family disappointment. The daughter who chose blueprints over bridal magazines, who dared to dream bigger than the narrow future my father had planned for me. "It's for your brother's wedding," he said without looking up from his desk, as if taking my life savings was as casual as borrowing a pen. Vincenzo needs it more than you do. You're not getting married anytime soon anyway. The leather chair creaked as I sat down, my knees weak. That was my money, Dad. I earned every penny of it. He finally looked up, his reading glasses perched on his nose, wearing that expression I'd grown to hate, the one that said I was being difficult again. Jayla, be reasonable. Your brother is starting a family. You're just... He waved his hand dismissively. Playing with buildings. Playing with... I choked on the words. I'm an architect. I graduated top of my class. I've designed... Yes, he interrupted. But Vincenzo is giving us grandchildren. He's carrying on the Rodriguez name. What are you doing except working like a man? The familiar ache in my chest intensified. I thought of the countless nights I'd spent hunched over my drafting table, of the promotions I'd earned, of the respect I'd gained in my firm. All of it meant nothing to him. How much did you take? I asked, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. 45,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. Nearly 3 years of savings, gone. Just like that. And you didn't think to ask me first? He sighed, the sound heavy with patronizing patience. Majida, when you finally find a husband, we'll help with your wedding too. But right now... Stop. I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Just stop. The office suddenly felt too small, too suffocating. Through the open door, I could hear my mother in the kitchen, humming as she prepared dinner. The same dinner we'd been having every Sunday for years, where Vincenzo would dominate the conversation with his latest business ventures while I sat quietly, my achievements gathering dust in the corner. Your brother needs this money to secure his future, my father continued. His wedding to Talia needs to be perfect. You understand, don't you? I looked at him. Really looked at him. The gray in his hair, the lines around his mouth, the absolute certainty in his eyes that he was right. That he was doing what was best for his children. For his family. Actually, Dad, I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. I don't understand, but I will make you understand. Soon. He frowned. What does that mean? I turned to leave, pausing at the doorway. You know what the funny thing is? I was saving that money for a down payment. I'm about to close a deal that would have made you proud, if you'd ever bothered to ask about my career. Jayla. No. I cut him off. You've said enough. But don't worry, Dad. I'll be at Vincenzo's wedding. I wouldn't miss it for the world. I walked out of his office, past my mother who called out, Mija, aren't you staying for dinner? Not today, Mom. I have work to do. As I drove away from my childhood home, I could see my father watching from the window. He probably thought I was being dramatic, that I'd cool off and everything would go back to normal. He didn't know that normal had just died in that office. My phone buzzed with a text from my boss, Bianca. Meeting tomorrow at 9. Bringing big news. You ready to change the game? A smile spread across my face as I typed back, more ready than ever. The sun was setting over the city skyline. My city, the one I'd helped shape with my designs. My father thought I was playing with buildings? Fine. I'd show him exactly what kind of games I could play. I pulled into my apartment complex, my mind already racing with plans. Vincenzo's wedding was in 3 months. 3 months to turn my father's theft into the biggest mistake he'd ever made. 3 months to prove that his daughter wasn't just an architect. She was a force to be reckoned with. As I stepped into my elevator, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Vincenzo. Hey sis, need you to help with some wedding stuff. Dad said you're on board? I stared at the message, thinking about how my brother had always taken everything for granted. My father's approval, my mother's attention, and now my money. Of course, I typed back. Wouldn't miss it for anything. The elevator doors closed, and I caught my reflection in the mirrored walls. I looked different somehow. Stronger. Determined. Game on, Dad. Game on. The Harrison Tower project? I leaned forward in my chair, hardly daring to breathe. You're giving it to me? Bianca smiled from across her desk, her eyes twinkling. Not giving, Jayla. You earned it. Your designs were exceptional, and the client specifically requested you. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office, illuminating the scale models that lined the shelves. One of them could be mine. The thought made my heart race. I paused, thinking of my father's dismissive wave just yesterday. This is exactly what I need right now. There's more, Bianca said, sliding a folder across her desk. The client wants to fast-track the project. If you nail this, we're looking at making you partner by year's end. Partner. At 28. The word echoed in my head like a bell. When do I start? Right now. But first... Bianca leaned back, studying me with that penetrating gaze that had intimidated me when I first started working for her. What's going on with you? You've got that look. What look? The one that says you're about to either break down or break through. I've been mentoring architects for 15 years, Jayla. I know that look. I hesitated, then told her everything. About my father, the stolen savings, Vincenzo's wedding. By the time I finished, Bianca's expression had hardened. 45,000? She shook her head. That's not just theft, that's a statement. He's telling you what he thinks you're worth. Exactly. I clenched my fists under the desk. And I'm going to prove him wrong. The Harrison Tower could do that. Bianca tapped the folder. It's a $100 million project. Your name would be everywhere. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Your father wants to know if you're coming to dinner tonight. Vincenzo has an announcement. I ignored it. There's something else you should know, Bianca said, standing up to close her office door. The location for the Harrison Tower? It's that old building your father's been trying to buy for his business expansion. I stared at her. What? I did my research when the property came up. Your father's company has been bidding on it for months. But with this project, she smiled. We'll be buying it first. The irony was delicious. The very money my father had taken from me might have helped him secure that property. Now I could take it right out from under him. When's the closing date? I asked. 3 months from now. I laughed. The same day as Vincenzo's wedding. Perfect timing, I said, but I'll need to keep this quiet until then. Of course. Bianca nodded. Though I heard through the grapevine that your father's planning quite the speech at the wedding. Something about family values and following tradition? My stomach turned. How do you know that? Your brother's fiancée, Talia. Her father plays golf with our CEO. Apparently, your dad's been bragging about how his son is carrying on the family legacy while his daughter... She trailed off. While his daughter what? You don't want to know. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Vincenzo. Dad's announcing me as VP of the company tonight. You should be there, sis. Family moment and all that. I showed Bianca the text. VP? She raised an eyebrow. Isn't your brother's company struggling? What do you mean? Just rumors, but... She pulled up something on her computer. Your brother's latest venture lost 3 major clients last month. If your father's promoting him now, he's trying to save face. I finished, using my money to fund a wedding and a promotion that'll look good to investors, while ignoring the daughter who's actually successful. Bianca stood up and walked to her window, gesturing for me to join her. See that skyline? In 6 months, your design will be part of it. That's real legacy, Jayla, not some handed-down title. I typed a reply to Vincenzo. Sorry. Big presentation tomorrow. Can't make it. Congratulations on the promotion. I should warn you, Bianca said, watching me. Once we announce the Harrison Tower project, your father will know. He might try to interfere. Let him try. I picked up the folder, already mentally sketching designs. I've spent my whole life being the quiet, understanding daughter. Not anymore. That's my girl. Bianca grinned. Now go make history. As I walked to my office, I passed the wall of previous projects. Soon mine would be there. Bigger and better than anything my father could imagine. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from my mother. Your father's disappointed you're not coming. Says you're choosing work over family again. I smiled, thinking of the Harrison Tower plans in my hands. No, Mom, I whispered. I'm choosing myself. I sat at my desk, spread out the plans, and began to work. Let my father have his dinner, his announcements, his illusions of control. In 3 months, I'd show him exactly what his disappointing daughter could do. And it would be spectacular. You look exactly like I expected, Talia said, sliding into the booth across from me at the coffee shop. Successful, independent, everything your father warned me about. I nearly choked on my latte. He warned you about me? Oh, yes. She stirred her green tea, a wry smile playing on her lips. Said I should be careful not to let you influence me with your modern ideas. I hadn't expected this when Talia asked to meet. I'd imagined another wedding planning session, more color schemes and seating arrangements. Instead, my future sister-in-law was serving up family secrets with her tea. And yet here you are, I said, studying her. She was beautiful in an understated way, nothing like the flashy women Vincenzo usually dated. Here I am. She leaned forward. Because I need to know. Is it true what they say about you? That you're the most promising architect in the city? Who says that? My father. He's on the board of several development companies. He's been following your work. I felt a flutter of pride, quickly followed by anger. Of course, my future father-in-law knew about my success, but my own father couldn't be bothered to notice. I'm good at what I do, I said carefully, but I'm guessing that's not why you wanted to meet. Talia glanced around the cafe before lowering her voice. Your father took your savings for our wedding, Vincenzo told me last night. He was drunk, bragging about how your dad always puts him first. My hands tightened around my cup. And I think it's disgusting. Her voice shook slightly. Just like I think it's disgusting that Vincenzo's being promoted to VP when his last 3 projects failed miserably. I sat up straighter. How do you know about that? Because I'm the one who's been covering his tracks. She pulled out her phone, showing me spreadsheets. I'm an accountant. Vincenzo hired me to fix his books before showing them to your father. That's how we met. Does my father know? No. He sees what he wants to see. Talia put her phone away. Just like he doesn't see that I hate the idea of this huge, expensive wedding, or that I'm terrified of becoming just another trophy wife in his perfect family picture. I studied her face, seeing the same frustration I'd been carrying for years. Then why are you going through with it? Because I love Vincenzo, despite his faults. And because... She hesitated. Because I thought maybe I could change things from the inside. But I need an ally. An ally for what? Your father's planning to make a speech at the wedding. He's going to announce Vincenzo's promotion, praise him for upholding family values, and then... She met my eyes. He's going to use you as an example of what happens when women stray from tradition. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. He wouldn't dare. He would. Unless what? Unless someone beats him to the punch. Talia smiled, and for the first time, I saw steel behind her gentle demeanor. I've seen the building permits, Jayla. I know about the Harrison Tower project. I froze. How? Like I said, my father's connected. He also told me your father's been trying to buy that property. The timing of the wedding announcement and the closing date can't be coincidence. It's not, I admitted, but I can't talk about the project yet. You don't have to. Just know that when the time comes... She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You'll have at least one person in that room on your side. My phone buzzed, a text from Vincenzo. Where are you? Talia's supposed to be at the florist. Talia glanced at her own phone and rolled her eyes. He tracks my location. Says it's because he worries. That doesn't bother you? Everything bothers me lately. She stood up, straightening her designer dress. But maybe it's time both of us stopped being the quiet, accommodating women they want us to be. As she gathered her things, she paused. One more thing. Your father's business, it's not as stable as he pretends. He needs that property more than anyone knows. How bad is it? Bad enough that he's using your money to fund a wedding we don't even want. She adjusted her bag. Think about that when you're designing your tower. I watched her walk away, her heels clicking on the tile floor. My phone buzzed again, this time with a message from my mother. Wedding dress shopping tomorrow. Your father expects you there. I thought about Talia's revelations, about my father's planned speech, about the Harrison Tower plans sitting on my desk at work. For the first time since this all began, I felt something beyond anger. I felt hope. Count me in. I texted back to my mother. Wouldn't miss it for the world. After all, every great revenge story needs a dress rehearsal. And thanks to Talia, I now had front row seats to my family's carefully constructed facade, crumbling brick by brick. The show was about to get interesting. Sign here, the property agent said, sliding the final document across the glossy conference table. And the Harrison Tower site is yours. My hand didn't shake as I signed, though my heart was racing. Bianca stood behind me, her presence steady and reassuring. The moment my pen left the paper, applause broke out around the room. Congratulations, Ms. Rodriguez, the agent beamed. You've just made history. Youngest female architect to secure a project of this scale in the city. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. A text from my father. Where are you? The wedding planner is waiting. Your brother's special day is more important than whatever building you're playing with. I tucked my phone away without responding, turning to Bianca instead. When do we announce? Press release goes out tomorrow morning. She handed me a glass of champagne. Your father should see it just in time for the rehearsal dinner. The thought made me smile. 2 weeks until the wedding, and my father still had no idea what was coming. He'd been too busy parading Vincenzo around at business functions, showing off his newly minted VP son. Speaking of your father, Bianca lowered her voice. Our research team found something interesting about his company's finances. Before she could continue, my phone rang. Talia's name flashed on the screen. I have to take this, I said, stepping into the hallway. Talia. Your brother's drunk, she said without preamble. He just confessed something you need to hear. What is it? The money your father took from you? It wasn't just for the wedding. Vincenzo's last project failed so badly, they're facing lawsuits. Your savings helped cover that up. My free hand gripped the wall. How much did they lose? Enough that your father's desperate for that property you just bought. He needs to expand to stay afloat. She paused. He doesn't know I'm telling you this. Does my mother know? No one knows except Vincenzo, your father, and now us. She lowered her voice. They're at your parents' house right now, celebrating the property deal they think they're getting next week. I walked back into the conference room where Bianca was waiting with a concerned expression. I need to see those financial reports, I told her. 20 minutes later, I stared at the documents spread across the table, each page revealing another layer of my father's deception. He's been operating at a loss for months, Bianca explained. The Harrison Tower location was his last chance at a major expansion. Without it, his company fails, I finished. And Vincenzo's promotion is worthless, Bianca nodded. Your father's betting everything on this property deal going through. My phone buzzed again. A message from my mother. Your father's telling everyone at dinner how proud he is of Vincenzo. Please come, mija. Show some family support. I looked up at Bianca. The press release tomorrow. Can we make it bigger? She grinned. What did you have in mind? Full page in the business section. My photo, my credentials, and the project details. I want it impossible to ignore. Done. She paused. You know this will hurt them. They hurt me first. I gathered the papers. Besides, I'm just doing what my father always wanted, making a name for the family. My phone rang again. This time it was Vincenzo. Hey, sis, he slurred. Dad's making his special toast. Says he wishes you were more like me. Isn't that funny? You're the successful one, but he can't see it. Very funny, I said coldly. Hey, Vincenzo, how's that VP position working out? He went quiet. What do you mean? Nothing. Just wondering if you've told Dad about those lawsuits yet. How did you... He stopped. Talia told you. She did. Just like tomorrow's newspaper will tell everyone about my new project. The one on the property Dad wanted. Jayla, wait. I hung up, turning to Bianca. Let's make one more change to that press release. Add that the project will break ground the same day as my brother's wedding. That's cruel, Bianca said, but she was already typing the addition. No, I corrected her. Cruel is stealing your daughter's savings to cover up your son's failures. This is justice. My phone lit up with messages from my mother, my father, Vincenzo. I ignored them all except one from Talia. They're panicking. Your father just left dinner early to call his lawyer. It's starting. I picked up my champagne glass, watching the city lights through the conference room windows. Somewhere out there, my father was realizing his perfect world was about to shatter. To the Harrison Tower, I said, raising my glass. To karma, Bianca added with a wink. Tomorrow, everyone would know what the disappointing daughter had achieved. Tomorrow, my father would learn that his biggest mistake wasn't stealing my money. It was underestimating me. I took a sip of champagne, savoring the moment. The real celebration was still to come, and it would be served ice cold at my brother's wedding. The silence in my parents' kitchen was deafening. My mother stood at the sink, methodically washing dishes that were already clean, while the newspaper lay open on the counter between us. My face stared up from the business section, next to the headline, Rising Star Architect Secures Historic Harrison Tower Project. Your father hasn't slept, she finally said, not turning around. He's been in his office all night. Good. I took a sip of coffee, watching her shoulders tense at my response. Mija, why didn't you tell us? Like you told me about using my savings to cover Vincenzo's lawsuits? The plate in her hands clattered into the sink. She turned, water dripping from her fingers. How did you... Does it matter? I cut her off. What matters is that you knew. You knew and you said nothing. I wanted to. Her voice cracked. But your father is a liar. I stood up, pushing the newspaper toward her. Read it, Mom. Really read it. That's what your daughter accomplished while Dad was busy planning his perfect son's wedding. She picked up the paper with trembling hands. The property? This is the one your father wanted? Needed, I corrected, to save his failing company, but he was so busy dismissing me he never saw me coming. Jayla! My father's voice boomed from the doorway. He looked haggard, his usually immaculate suit wrinkled. What have you done? Built something of my own, I said calmly. Isn't that what you always wanted? For your children to be successful? He slammed his hand on the counter. You deliberately sabotaged this family. No, Dad. You did that when you stole from me. I borrowed that money for your brother's lawsuits, I finished. Not just his wedding. Tell Mom the truth. Tell her how you used my savings to cover up Vincenzo's failures. My mother's gasp was soft but sharp. Antonio, is this true? Before he could answer, Vincenzo burst in, his face red. The investors are pulling out. They saw the article about the property deal falling through. Dad, they're demanding their money back. Quiet, my father hissed, but it was too late. My mother sank into a chair. What money? What's happening to our family? Ask them, I said, nodding toward my father and brother. Ask them about the house of cards they've built. Or should I say, the house they tried to build with my money. You ungrateful? My father started, but his phone rang. His face paled when he saw the caller ID. I have to take this. As he rushed out, Vincenzo turned to me. You've ruined everything. No, I corrected him. I just exposed everything. There's a difference. The wedding's in a week, he pleaded. Can't you wait until after Dad makes his speech about family values? About how you're the model son while I'm the cautionary tale? I laughed bitterly. Not this time. My mother stood suddenly. I need to show you something. She hurried to the family room, returning with an old photo album. Look, she opened it to a page showing me as a child, proudly holding up a drawing of a building. You were always building things, creating. I should have protected that spark in you. Mom. No, let me finish. She turned another page, revealing newspaper clippings of my early projects that I'd never seen before. I saved everything. Every achievement, every article. I was proud, Jayla. I am proud. I was too weak to stand up to your father. My throat tightened. Why show me this now? Because you're stronger than I ever was. She closed the album. And because you need to know that someone saw you, even when it seemed like no one did. My father's voice carried from his office, growing increasingly desperate. No, please, we can work something out. The property fell through, but... He's losing everything, isn't he? My mother asked quietly. Only what he built on lies, I replied. My success is real. The Harrison Tower is real. Vincenzo slumped against the counter. Talia's parents are calling off the wedding. They saw the article, did some digging. They know everything. As if summoned, Talia appeared in the doorway. Not everything. She walked to stand beside me. The wedding's still on, but we're doing it my way now. Small, honest, and without your father's speech. My mother looked between us, understanding dawning in her eyes. You two planned this. No, Talia said. Jayla earned this. I just helped truth find its way to light. My father returned, his face ashen. The board is calling an emergency meeting. They want me to step down. Good, I said, standing up. Now you'll have plenty of time to watch them build my tower on the property you wanted so badly. I headed for the door, pausing only when my mother called out, Where are you going? To work, Mom. I have a legacy to build. I looked at my father. A real one. The door closed behind me with a satisfying click, leaving them to face the wreckage of their carefully constructed lies. The wedding was still a week away, but the real ceremony, the dismantling of my father's empire, had already begun. The church bells tolled as I adjusted my bridesmaid's dress in the mirror. Talia stood beside me, radiant in a simple white gown that had cost a fraction of the original monstrosity my father had insisted on. Your father's pacing outside, she said, applying a final touch of lipstick. He still thinks he's giving that speech. Let him think that. I patted the envelope in my clutch containing the final papers for the Harrison Tower project. Everyone else knows better. A knock at the door made us both turn. My mother entered, her eyes red, but her spine straight. The board accepted his resignation this morning, she said quietly. He didn't want me to tell you. But you did anyway. I smiled at her. That's new. She smoothed her dress, a nervous habit I'd seen 1,000 times before. I've been doing a lot of new things lately, like checking our accounts. She met my eyes in the mirror. I've transferred your savings back to you, with interest. Mom, no. She held up her hand. Let me finish. I also found proof of everything. The lawsuits, the cover-ups. I've given copies to the board. Talia gasped softly. You reported your own husband? I reported a man who stole from his daughter and lied to his family. My mother's voice was firm. It's time we all faced the truth. Another knock and Vincenzo poked his head in. He looked hungover and nervous. Dad's insisting on making his announcement before the ceremony. No, Talia said, turning to face him. We agreed. I know, but he's threatening to walk out if we don't let him speak. Vincenzo ran a hand through his hair. He says he needs to salvage what's left of the family's reputation. I exchanged glances with Talia. Let him speak. Jayla, my mother warned, don't make this worse. Trust me, I said, squeezing her hand. Some things need to be said out loud. The church was packed when we entered, though not with the business elite my father had originally invited. Instead, Talia's real friends and family filled the pews, along with my colleagues from the firm. Bianca sat in the front row, giving me a subtle thumbs up. My father stood at the altar, his usual commanding presence diminished by the events of the past week. But his eyes still burned with the same righteous certainty I'd grown up with. "Before we begin," he announced, his voice echoing through the church, "I want to say a few words about family." The audience shifted uncomfortably. They'd all seen the news about his resignation, about the company's troubles. "Family," he continued, "is about tradition, about knowing your place and playing your part. My son, Vincenzo, understands this. He's following in my footsteps, carrying on our legacy." "What legacy?" The words left my mouth before I could stop them. Every head turned toward me. "Jayla," my father warned, "don't." But I was already walking toward the altar, the envelope in my hand. "You want to talk about legacy, Dad? Let's talk about it. This is your brother's wedding." "Yes, it is." I turned to face the congregation. "And since we're all here to witness a union, let me share some truth about our family's unity." My father stepped forward, but my mother caught his arm. "Let her speak, Antonio. For once in your life, let her speak." 3 months ago," I continued, "my father took my savings without my permission. He used it to cover up my brother's business failures and fund this wedding. He did this because he believed a daughter's achievements mean nothing compared to a son's failures." Murmurs rippled through the church. But here's what he didn't know. I opened the envelope, holding up the papers. While he was trying to save his crumbling empire, I was building something real. The Harrison Tower project breaks ground today. My design, my achievement, my legacy. "Enough," my father shouted. "No, Dad. For once, it's not enough." I turned to Vincenzo and Talia. "Your children, if you have them, will look up at that tower one day, and they'll know that their aunt built it, not because of her last name, but despite it." Talia stepped forward, taking my hand. "And they'll know that success isn't about maintaining appearances. It's about building something honest, something true." The church was silent. My father stood frozen, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. My mother watched him, tears in her eyes but resolution on her face. "Now," I said, handing the envelope to Bianca, who had joined us at the altar. "I believe we have a wedding to celebrate, one based on love and truth, not lies and appearances." As I took my place beside Talia, I caught my mother's eye. She nodded slightly, and for the first time in years, I saw pride there. Real pride. Not the polite fiction we'd lived with for so long. The ceremony began, but something had shifted in that sacred space. My father's power, built on manipulation and control, had been replaced by something stronger, the truth. And as Talia and Vincenzo exchanged their vows, I felt the last chains of my father's expectations fall away. The real ceremony today wasn't just a wedding. It was a liberation. The reception hall hummed with subdued conversation as servers cleared the dinner plates. My father hadn't touched his food, staring instead at the large presentation screen where photos of the happy couple cycled through. He knew what was coming. "Ready?" Talia whispered, squeezing my hand under the table. I nodded, catching Bianca's eye across the room. She pulled out her phone, and seconds later, the slideshow transformed into the architectural renderings of the Harrison Tower. The room fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," Bianca's voice carried clearly through the space. "As a wedding gift to the lovely couple, we'd like to share something special. Today marks not only Vincenzo and Talia's union, but also the groundbreaking of a project that will transform our city's skyline." My father's knuckles turned white around his wineglass. "Leading this revolutionary project," Bianca continued, "is one of our own. Jayla, would you like to share with everyone?" I stood, smoothing my dress. The Harrison Tower isn't just a building, it's a statement about legacy, about earning your place in the world rather than having it handed to you. The screen showed the tower's base, where my name would be permanently displayed as lead architect. "Some of you might have read about recent changes at my father's company," I continued, watching him flinch. "About how he resigned after certain truths came to light." "Jayla," my mother warned softly, but I pressed on. "What you might not know is that this project, my project, sits on the very property he tried to acquire using money he stole from me." I turned to face him directly. Money that was meant to cover up failures, not fund successes. Vincenzo stood abruptly. That's enough. No. Talia cut him off, rising to stand beside me. Your sister's right. I've spent months fixing your books, hiding your mistakes. No more lies. The room erupted in whispers. My father pushed back his chair with a screech. You ungrateful child, he spat. I gave you everything. You gave me nothing. My voice rang out. Everything I have, I earned. While you were propping up Vincenzo's failing businesses, I was winning contracts. While you were stealing my savings, I was designing the future. Antonio. My mother's voice cut through the tension. Sit down. To everyone's surprise, he did. Our daughter, she continued, standing slowly, has achieved something remarkable. And you're going to sit there and watch as she announces her triumph, just as you've made her sit through countless celebrations of our son. The screen changed to show the tower's completion date. Gasps filled the room as people recognized its significance. Yes, I confirmed. The Harrison Tower will open exactly 1 year from today, on what would have been Dad's 30th anniversary as CEO of his company. The company he lost because he couldn't see past his own prejudices. You planned this, my father accused. You deliberately timed everything to destroy me. No, Dad, you destroyed yourself. I just built something better from the ruins. Bianca stepped forward, champagne glass raised. To the Harrison Tower and to its brilliant architect, and to karma, which it turns out has impeccable timing. The room filled with the sound of clinking glasses, but I wasn't done. One more thing, I said, pulling an envelope from my clutch. Talia, Vincenzo, this is my real wedding gift to you. They opened it together. Vincenzo's face paled. A job offer? He read aloud. Entry-level position in project management. I confirmed, because everyone deserves a chance to earn their success. Even you, brother. Talia smiled, understanding immediately. He accepts. What? But Vincenzo started, but Talia silenced him with a look. You accept, she repeated firmly, because it's time to build something real. My father pushed away from the table and stormed toward the exit. At the door, he turned back. You think you've won? He demanded. You think this makes you powerful? No, Dad, I replied calmly. This makes me free. The door slammed behind him. In the ringing silence, my mother raised her glass. To freedom, she said, and to the daughter I should have defended long ago. The celebration resumed, but something had fundamentally changed. I watched as Vincenzo stared at the job offer, as Talia beamed with pride, as my mother stood taller than I'd ever seen her. Bianca appeared at my side. You know, revenge is usually ugly, but this? She gestured to the architectural renderings still floating across the screen. This is beautiful. It's not revenge, I corrected her. It's restoration. Of truth, of dignity, of balance. My phone buzzed with a message from the construction site. Ground broken. Foundation work beginning now. I smiled, thinking of the symmetry. As my father's carefully constructed facade crumbled, my tower was literally breaking ground. As his lies were exposed, my truth was rising. To new foundations, I whispered, raising my glass to the future I'd designed, both architectural and personal. The tower would rise, and with it, a new legacy. One built on merit, not manipulation. On truth, not tradition. And this time, no one could steal it from me. The sun glinted off the Harrison Tower's glass facade as I stood at its base, watching the installation crew mount the final letter of my name. Each metallic character caught the light, spelling out a truth my father had never wanted to see. It's perfect, Talia said, linking her arm through mine. Though I think your new office might have an even better view than mine. I smiled, remembering how she'd transformed the tower's financial department into one of the city's most respected consulting firms. How's my brother doing with those quarterly reports? Getting better. Having to earn his promotions has been educational for him. She checked her watch. Speaking of which, your mother's waiting upstairs. She said she has something important to show you. The elevator ride to the top floor felt different now that the building was alive with activity. People nodded respectfully as we passed, no longer seeing me as just Antonio's disappointing daughter, but as the architect who'd changed the city's skyline. My mother stood at the window of my office, holding a familiar photo album and a stack of papers. "I found these in your father's study," she said without turning around. "He kept every article about you, every award announcement, even while he was—" She trailed off. "Even while he was trying to stop me?" She nodded, finally facing me. "He came by the house yesterday, asked if I'd give these to you. Why didn't he bring them himself?" Pride. She set the album on my desk. The same pride that made him refuse to admit he was wrong all those years. But he's been watching, Jayla. Every day of construction, he stood across the street and watched your tower rise. A knock at the door interrupted us. Bianca entered, followed by Vincenzo. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, looking uncomfortable in his business casual attire, so different from his old power suits. "But we have a situation with the plaza design." "Show me," I said, following him to the blueprints spread across the conference table. As he explained the issue, I noticed something different in his voice. The arrogance was gone, replaced by genuine interest and understanding. He'd learned more about construction in the past months than he had in years of running his own company. "What if we adjusted the fountain placement?" he suggested, sketching quickly. "It would create better flow for foot traffic." "That's actually brilliant," I admitted. He grinned, and for a moment I saw the brother I'd known before our father's expectations had warped everything. "I had a good teacher," he said quietly. Another knock made us all turn. There, in my office doorway, stood my father. The room fell silent. He looked older, smaller somehow, without his expensive suit and CEO title. He held a single envelope in his hands. "Jayla," he said, his voice rough. "I need to say something." "Dad, please." He stepped forward. "I've spent months trying to find the right words. Watching this building rise floor by floor, seeing your name go up today, I realized something." My mother moved to stand beside me, her hand finding mine. "I was wrong," he said simply. "About everything. About you." He held out the envelope. "This isn't an apology. No paper could hold that. But it's a start." Inside was a deed. My hands shook as I read it. "Your childhood home," he explained. "I've signed it over to you. Do with it what you want. Sell it, rebuild it, tear it down. It's yours like it always should have been." "Why now?" "Because you've built something I never could." He gestured to the tower around us. "Not just this building, but trust, respect, real success. You did it your way, despite me, not because of me. And I'm proud of you." The words I'd waited decades to hear hung in the air between us. "There's something else," my mother said, pulling out one final paper from the album. It was a child's drawing, my first building design sketched in crayon at age 7. My father had kept it all these years. "I was wrong about legacies too," he said. "They're not given or stolen. They're built piece by piece, just like your tower." Vincenzo stepped forward. "Dad, there's an entry-level position opening in my department." My father shook his head. "No, I need to build something of my own first. The right way this time." He turned to leave, then paused. "The view from across the street. It's amazing. You can see the whole city from there, but it's better up here, isn't it?" "Yes," I said softly. "It is." After he left, we stood in silence, absorbing what had happened. Finally, Talia spoke. "So, about that plaza fountain." We all laughed, the tension breaking. I looked around at my family. Not the one bound by my father's rigid expectations, but the one we'd built ourselves. My mother standing tall and proud. Vincenzo, learning to earn his place. Talia, turning financial truth into power. Bianca, who'd believed in me from the start. and somewhere on the street below, my father, finally looking up and seeing me. Really seeing me for the first time. I touched the window, my reflection overlaying the city I'd helped shape. Let's redesign that plaza. Together. Because that's how the best things are built. Not alone, not through force or theft or lies, but together, with truth and trust as the foundation.